across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, a very good evening. It's just gone 7 o'clock. I'm Peter Cardwell. Thank you so much for your company. Lots to discuss today, including the 5 other nations joining in the UK and saying they're ready to contribute to ensure safe passage through the Strait of Hormuz. We'll talk about the immigration crisis in this country. Finally, Labour seem to have some sort of strong policy. And what's happened now? Well, Keir Starmer says that he may well do a U-turn on it, but he's not sure, and he might, and he's not really sure. And maybe Shabana Mahmood, the Home Secretary, maybe he'll back her up, or maybe he won't. We'll speak to a Labour MP in a second. We'll also go to the debate desk with Elliot Keck and Lucy Beresford about that U-turn, also about what the British military should do about the reopening of the Strait of Hormuz, the criminal migrant allowed to stay in Britain after fighting deportation for arguing his son disliked foreign chicken nuggets. Yes, it was his son's human right to have British chicken nuggets. He is a scumbag who spent 2 years in prison. Well, he's now been allowed to stay in the UK. It just, the immigration system in this country is absolutely bat. It is crazy. Also, David Lammy, who wants to abolish jury trials, well, he's been told that male judges are going to discriminate against women, apparently, and there aren't enough ethnic minorities, so the wokies are not happy. We'll talk to Ralph Scholhammer, my most popular guest ever. We'll talk to him. We'll also talk about the Middle East with the former ambassador to Afghanistan, who's been in various other places around the world as well. And we will ask the man why he has decided to try every car parking space in his local Sainsbury's, and not content with one of the places he lived in, he then moved to a new town and is doing the same thing as well. You're not going to want to miss that story about the man who is a car parking fanatic. And also, I'd love to ask you, what is it about car parking that drives you mad, especially in your local Sainsbury's or Tesco's or whichever supermarket you go to, because he's tested every single spot in all of the local one that he's been to. I know someone in my family, actually, a big walker, big fan of walking, and walks a few miles a day, yet will move heaven and earth to get as close as possible to the supermarket. Whatever you want to say, however you want to say it, and please, I'm making a special appeal for voice notes. I used to get quite a lot on the weekend shows, not so many now. I want to tell you, if you send in a voice note and we can play it, we will play it. Can we play it? I literally mean, is it legal? Is it about the topics we're talking about? We will play it out between now and 10 o'clock. So send me a voice note, less than a minute, to 0344 499 1000. That's the number for calls as well. I want to get as many calls on the air. I can see people ringing in already. You can also text me 87222. With the word talk in your text. You can send me a tweet at talkTV, follow me at Peter Cardwell. You can send me a WhatsApp text message to 0344 499 1000. You can also give me a ring on that number, or, as I say, send in those voice notes. One weekend, I think we played, how many voice notes did we play one weekend? 16, 17? There was one weekend on a Saturday, we played absolutely loads of them, and I love voice notes, and I'd love to have more of them, so please do send them in. Loads to discuss between now and 10 o'clock. Stay with us here on Talk. Dawn's already been in touch and says Keir Starmer's behaviour at Prime Minister's questions was absolutely bizarre. Now he is panicking after Angela Rayner's attack on the treatment of migrants. Desperate times. Well, we're asking the question this evening, will Starmer ever stop being pushed around? But is he actually being pushed around, or is he pushing other people around, especially his Home Secretary, Shabana Mahmood? Graham Stringer is the Labour MP for Blakely and Middleton South. Graham, good evening.
Good evening.
It's very interesting that the Prime Minister doesn't seem to quite know what he thinks about his own immigration policy. There's been a very, very interesting movement over the last 24 hours or so, repeatedly refusing to say Downing Street whether the government would press ahead with plans devised by Shabana Mahmood to increase the time it takes for migrants already in the UK to qualify for permanent settlement. And this comes after a speech by Angela Rayner, the former Deputy Prime Minister, who said the plans were un-British and pulled the rug from underneath hard-working families. Do you agree with Angela Rayner, and do you think these policies should go forward?
The last time I looked at news updates, there were quotes from the Prime Minister saying he hadn't changed his mind on anything. I don't know whether that will hold till tomorrow or the day after, but that was the latest. I support the changes that Shabana is making in the round. One of the things I'm uneasy about is not that I particularly agree with Angela, but it is retrospective legislation on anything. If people come to this country on one basis and the rules change, I'm very, very uneasy about that.
Yeah, it's fascinating actually, because we have had a sort of U-turn on the possible U-turn. We've had Shabana Mahmood saying there could be some transitional arrangements, and as you say, the Prime Minister says he hasn't changed his mind. But there's clearly a rockiness and unsteadiness in government at the moment. We know there have been about 15 different U-turns on immigration and all the policies that Shabana Mahmood wants to put forward. I just wonder whether her plan, you think, will work if it's allowed the time and space to actually become law and work.
I think some of it will work. It will take some of the pull factor out of coming to this country. I think what annoys the people I represent more than anything else is not the volume of immigrants, although that is a problem as well in terms of just sheer pressure on services and housing and cash. It is those people who arrive here illegally. And I don't think, and I think I've said it before on your show, I don't think we will stop the small boats coming over while we're still in the ECHR. I think that's the real problem. These people must have had documents to travel right the way across Eurasia in many cases, or Africa or wherever. You wouldn't get through those countries without documents, but they arrive here without documents. So they're trying to con the immigration officials, and then they claim asylum, and nobody knows who they are, whether they're decent people or whether in actual fact they're murderers and rapists. And I don't think we should accept people into this country apart from in the most exceptional circumstances if they don't have papers, particularly when all the circumstantial evidence is they must have had papers to get into those small boats.
Yeah, it's very interesting actually when we look at people who've been here for many years and they're perhaps being told they have to stay there for longer. We also have this absurd case. You talked about the European Convention on Human Rights there, about a migrant who fought deportation by arguing his son disliked foreign chicken nuggets, has the right to stay in Britain. I mean, I wish I was making this stuff up, Graham, but your constituents, our viewers and listeners, will see the case of someone who was jailed for 2 years in 2017. I mean, it should be a formality to have him expelled from this country, yet he has said his child does have special needs, but part of the argument was about these chicken nuggets. I mean, I almost can't believe I'm asking you this question, but what on earth has happened here?
Well, I mean, it's the judges. I mean, there are many things that the government gets right, many things get wrong. But in this case, it's judges making extreme judgments on the basis of the ECHR. And that's one of the reasons it's so loosely drawn. And that legislation, we can't change it in this country. I think there have been, certainly into double figures, attempts to try and change it, and nobody's succeeded. And I think we're just better off out of it.
Would that be a panacea, though? Would that solve the whole problem? Because there's so much of this human rights law that's baked into British law as well. And I do see, I'm not accusing you of this, Graham, because you're a very straightforward guy, but the fact that there are some politicians who are saying, we leave the HR, everything's fixed.
No, I don't believe that, and we probably need to leave the Refugee Convention as well and set up a system where this country's been generous about bringing refugees in, whether it's from Hong Kong or Ukraine. But we've made decisions about that, going back as far as the mid-50s, people came from Hungary. And I think in those circumstances, we should allow people in, but just have a complete free market where people are coming from all over the world. I don't think no, I don't think it's a panacea. I think it's the first step that would certainly make it more difficult for people to cheat the system when they're coming into this country. But if there are any panaceas in the world at all, it's us taking control of what we said we would, the borders, when we left the EU. And that means saying no to people and being able to do that and be supported by the courts, because UK law is saying that the government is acting within the law.
I just want to play a little bit of Prime Minister's questions yesterday, where the Prime Minister was asked 6 times about Peter Mandelson. He wanted to talk more, though, about a frontbencher, the Shadow Justice Secretary, Nick Timothy. Let's just have a little look at what happened in the House of Commons chamber yesterday.
She appointed the Shadow Justice Secretary. He said last night that Muslims praying in public, including the Mayor of London, practising his faith, are not welcome. He described it as an act of domination, straight from the Islamist playbook. If we're in my team, he'd be gone. It's utterly appalling. She should denounce his comments and she should sack him.
Should Kemi Badenoch denounce the comments of Nick Timothy and sack him?
No, and I think that there is this attempt to have a non-statutory definition of anti-Islamic behaviour. That's not quite the right words, but I'm sure your listeners know what I'm talking about. It's the latest stage in trying to define Islamophobia.
Yes.
One of the documents that goes with that statement is to say that there will be no attack on free speech. And I think one can agree with what was said, disagree with it, but I don't think one can challenge that Conservative MP's right to say what he was saying.
Do you agree with them, though, that so many hundreds of Muslims praying at Trafalgar Square is an act of domination? Do you think that wording is correct?
No, I don't really, but I would defend his right to say that if that's what he thinks and feels that way. I wouldn't use those phrases, but there are lots of phrases that people use that I wouldn't use. But I just think that it is somebody who has a view on and has said what his views are on the floor of the House of Commons on a number of occasions, and he's entitled to say how he feels about people praying in public. He's entitled to say what he feels about Islam. Islam is a choice, it's a religion, people can criticise it. It's not like racism, where I think people are plain stupid if they criticise people because they're black or any other colour. That's stupid. Religion is a choice, and it should be subject to criticism and debate like everything else in a free society.
Benjamin Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of Israel, is on his feet at the moment. He says the idea that they dragged the US into war is ridiculous. He says Iran has no capacity to make ballistic missiles. And the UK and 5 other nations, France, Germany, Italy, the Netherlands and Japan, have released a statement saying we express our readiness to contribute to appropriate efforts to ensure safe passage through the Strait of Hormuz. This is shipping, of course, and this joint statement says it's about stabilising the energy markets. The objectives of Israel, Netanyahu says, are to completely annihilate Iran's nuclear program, completely annihilate Iran's ballistic missile program, and to create conditions that allow Iranians to take their fate into their own hands. I just wonder what you make of both the statement and what Netanyahu is saying.
I think it's been clear from Netanyahu from the beginning that he wants regime change and he wants the threat of Israel being annihilated by atomic weapons. He's been absolutely clear on his objectives, and I don't think there's anything new there. Unfortunately, the President of the United States hasn't been as clear in his objectives, so it's difficult to assess where it's going.
Sorry to interrupt you, Graham, but I absolutely agree with you. And I think that Trump has changed his mind, I think, or at least changed his messaging when it comes to regime change. I support this if it results in regime change. And I'm not sure Trump now cares about that. Is that a fair assessment?
I think that's about it. But Trump might have a different view tomorrow or later this evening because he does change out. What I do think, and I think it's a deeper point, is people in my party and in other parties wants negotiations and a peace deal. Everybody wants peace. But I don't think it is within the hands of Israel or the United States now, because if they stop attacking, will Iran stop doing what they've been doing for 30 years or more, which is attacking the West, both in cyberspace and in certain cases by murdering people in this country and other countries, and by sending rockets into Israel. And I don't think they will stop that. So I don't think it's in anybody's hands apart from Iran to cease this war. And I think the world would be a better place if the people of Iran had democracy and took control of their country. That has to be a sensible objective. Otherwise, we're going to be in a perpetual war with these awful people who run Iran.
So much common sense there from Graham Stringer. Thank you, Graham. Graham is the Labour MP for Blakely and Middleton South. Thanks to everybody who's been in touch, including the person who says that Starmer is panicking about Rayner's attack on the treatment of migrants. Penny says, I am seriously worried about a judge who can allow a migrant to stay in the UK because his son only likes British chicken nuggets. This is unbelievable. No wonder we are a laughing stock the whole world over. What is happening to the UK? Too far gone to go back to normal now. That's Penny in Essex there. Robert in Chiswick in West London says, with voting figures dropping through the floor, confidence in politicians is at an all-time low, with Starmer's total respect after his nonsense at PMQs. How much longer do these MPs think the British people are going to put up with it? It is getting bad. Michael says, if the Speaker really cares about democracy and the rights of backbenchers, he would suspend the Prime Minister until he answers questions. He has the power to do it. Well, it's interesting. A number of people have actually contacted me on social media about this, about whether the Speaker can compel the Prime Minister to give answers at Prime Minister's questions, or just a minister who's being asked questions that are sort of departmental questions that happen as well. The answer is no, he can't. And the Minister or the Prime Minister may well say, look, I am giving an answer. It may not be the answer that other people want, but I am giving an answer. The good thing that Lindsay Hoyle has done previously, I don't think he's a perfect speaker by any stretch of the imagination, but what he has done previously is that he said, you know, he's reminded particularly Keir Starmer and said, this is not opposition leader question time. This is Prime Minister's question time. So can you please answer the questions? Graham Stringer's a sensible, common sense Labour voice, says Rob. An absolute rarity these days. He should join Reform UK. I have put that point to Graham Stringer before. He's not going to. Mark in Selby says, has anyone asked the organiser of the mass Muslim prayer in Trafalgar Square why it had to be outside and in the square? Let's hear sound reasons as to this inflammatory action. We know that other religious communities have done that too at various points. And thank you to Joanna in Salisbury. Hi, Joanna, who says, hi, Cardi P. A man trying every parking space in Sainsbury's. I thought I had a boring life. He must like shopping for mushrooms there. He's a fun guy. Joanna, you know I hate puns. No more of those, please. Wordplay is just really childish, and I really think it should be avoided at all costs. Stay with us here on Talk.
think Donald Trump has a plan post-war?
A couple of weeks ago, when he started this off, he made a speech saying help would be on the way for the people. There was going to be regime change.
He appointed Mandelson against advice. We know this to be true. If this was a Conservative Prime Minister, the wider left would be absolutely screaming for his resignation.
Government's announced this afternoon, we're setting up a people's panel to work out exactly how you want us to roll out these digital IDs. We don't want them.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, thank you to everybody who has been in touch. We'll get back to your calls, texts, tweets and voice notes very, very soon indeed. But I want to go straight to the debate desk now. Lucy Beresford, the psychotherapist and broadcaster, is with us. Good evening to you. How are you doing?
I'm very well, thank you.
Yeah, seeing you in the hours of darkness again, which is fabulous. It's great. And Elliot Keck is with us from the Taxpayers Alliance, head of campaigns there. Good evening.
Good evening, Peter.
How are you?
Yeah, good, thank you.
Yeah,
good,
prime time for
I know, my first time. It's very exciting.
Yeah, we've actually got, it's interesting because we're having these whole meetings with all the people behind the scenes, creative.
Yeah.
What do you do? I'm a creative. We're having a meeting with them soon, not immediately. It was meant to be yesterday. It didn't work out. We're doing it next week. And we've got a new name for the show, but I can't tell you what it is yet. Very exciting.
You can tell us off air though, can't you?
Maybe, if you're very good. We've had market sensitive. We've had quite a number of suggestions from people, which have been really, really good. Loads of people sending them in, and we've chosen one, and we're going to announce it soon. And I'm excited. It's not just like the evening with Peter.
It's great news. I always thought you were too good to be watched when people were just hungover on a weekend. I thought you deserved people's maximum attention.
That's the only
on
yeah, exactly.
When they're having a glass of wine. Well, so you might need alcohol to get through what I say. Right, we're going to talk about all the different issues of the day. Let's start with Starmer signalling the migrant U-turn, perhaps after pressure. We're asking people at home actually, will Starmer ever stop being pushed around? 0344 499 1000 is the number to call about that. He does seem to do quite a lot of U-turns. Now he's not quite so sure what he's doing on migration. He says in the last few hours, I haven't changed my mind. Lucy.
Well, Angela Rayner's speech last night was seen as a broadside against this idea that the Shabana Mahmood's plans to, for example, make it harder for people to receive indefinite leave to remain, and that would actually be applied retrospectively to people who've been here not just 5 years but 10 years, was seen by Angela Rayner as something that she could push back against. And so there is a theory that in fact he might water down Shabana Mahmood's plans. But the very interesting thing was that we also had today Yvette Cooper talking about the weakening of the defence of the aid budget. But what you have to recognise is that some of the money that was being spent on the aid budget was very much being spent in certain countries to prevent migration from certain countries, to make life arguably more bearable or more attractive, more compelling for people to stay. And if you're slashing that aid budget for fairly understandable reasons given the geopolitical situation at the moment, then it may have to be that actually, yes, Keir Starmer U-turns yet again, Mr. Flip-Flop.
It's an interesting one actually. Why there'd be many people in this country who say, why should my taxes be used trying to persuade people to stay in the same country? I must say with Keir Starmer, with a leader, I want a leader who looks forward and goes forward. And what I'm seeing at the moment with Keir Starmer is somebody who's always looking over his shoulder. Angela Rayner over there, you know, the Green Party in another direction, all his backbenchers as well.
And Donald Trump even said this. You know, this anecdote that came out a couple of days ago where Trump says, you know, I spoke to Starmer and I said, you know, what are you going to make a decision? He said, I've got to speak to my team. And Trump says, you're the man in charge. You need to take some responsibility.
There's no one behind you. You're it. And interestingly, I mean, we're going to talk about Trump a little bit later on this. Have you seen this discussion he had with the Japanese?
About Pearl Harbor.
I mean, it's really like absolute whole body cringe territory. We'll talk about that a little bit later on. We'll show you the clip. Elliot, what do you make of Starmer and his potentially another U-turn?
Yeah, I think it's very clear that he's going to U-turn. This is how he always starts. He always starts by saying he hasn't changed his mind, and then maybe he's changed his mind a bit, and then he's changed his mind a lot, actually. What I find particularly embarrassing in terms of a reflection of the quality of our politicians is that Angela Rayner is not using this because this is in the best interest of the country. It's clearly not in the best interest of the country to allow the 1 million people that arrived over a couple of years.
Sorry, Elliot. Are you alleging that Angela Rayner's motives are not entirely pure?
Yeah.
Is that what, do you think there's some sort of ante-room that she's in, that there could be something else ahead
It's
of
possible,
her?
isn't it? It's possible that she might just be ambitious and that maybe she wouldn't mind climbing the greasy pole a couple more rungs. And it's clear
she sees
rungs. Yeah.
I'm going to pull of rungs. Yeah. That's what I want to know.
Yeah, exactly. And it's very clear she sees this as a bit of a weak point for the Prime Minister. But, Shabana Mahmood needs to stand up for this stuff. We had 1 million people arrive here in a pretty dodgy visa system. It's outrageous that after 5 years they're going to get full access to the UK benefit system. They could leave work, gain full access to our extraordinarily generous welfare system. Remember the maximum benefits that you can claim in the United Kingdom. You're talking about income, an equivalent income. I think the CSJ puts it as something like a household income of £70,000 if you're a couple in work. Yeah. The idea that 1 million people that have arrived a few years ago on this visa system should get access to this benefit system after 5 years is
many of them will be working though, Elliot, won't they?
Oh yeah, they will have been for the first 5 years, but there's nothing to compel them to work beyond that.
But why would you give up your job to go on benefits?
Because the reality is the benefit system is a lot more generous than it is to be in work below a certain salary threshold.
I mean, what is really interesting about this is that Angela Rayner's comments are obviously with one eye to the, if not both eyes, on the May local elections, at which Labour is widely predicted to be going to be doing really badly, compared to Reform, whose big pitch will be around immigration. So the idea that you would have a bad set of results and then actually shift your policy, dilute your policy away from what a lot of voters seem to be telling you is the thing that they're really worried about, that and the cost of living crisis, that just seems like self-harm of the party. So again, it makes no sense from a policy point of view. It makes all sense from an Angela Rayner wants to be Prime Minister point of view.
What do you make of the chicken nugget angle to the story, Elliot?
The chicken nugget angle, this is quite incredible, isn't it? So this is an Albanian man that came to the United Kingdom, lied about where he came from, lied about his name, committed quite a serious crime that he went to prison for.
2 years.
For 2 years, exactly. But hasn't been deported because a judge ruled under the European Court of Convention of Human Rights that his son might find it difficult to adapt if he moved to Albania, with one of the key reasons being that he had, I think, a restricted diet, and the chicken nuggets available in Albania wouldn't be quite to his palate.
Do you know if this was on TV, if this was like a drama or something, you just wouldn't. It's beyond farcical. Beyond farcical.
Yeah, you can imagine the write-ups in the papers saying it really, it pushed gullibility way too far. But this is basically the judge's ruling. I mean, the judge's ruling was a bit broader about his general dietary preferences, but the dietary preferences of a child can't be the basis about whether or not to deport a criminal father. Yeah. Particularly when we're not talking about deporting the criminal father to the Sudan.
I was going to say, I've been to Tirana.
Albania is a nice country.
Albania is a beautiful country, and it's got fantastic food, amazing culture.
Does it have chicken nuggets though? That's my question.
Let's just say I don't think I checked that out that thoroughly.
Are you not an expert on Albanian chicken nuggets? Because frankly, I'm disappointed. We're not booking again.
I'm not. I'm the person that would take friends to vegan restaurants even though they prefer meat.
Dreadful.
I did that with you.
Dreadful.
I'm so sorry.
No, I'll never forgive you.
Chicken is. That's right. It's not the South Sudan.
Lucy Beresford brought me to a vegan restaurant. Yeah.
That's my last appearance on the debate.
That's a marmalade job.
Woke Lucy Beresford. Yes, Beck has been in touch and said Graham Stringer is the only Labour MP I like. It reminds me of old school Labour like my granddad. Terence says, regarding the Sainsbury's parking guy and the fun guy joke, Peter should have said a silly pun should be avoided at all Costco's. That would have been very good, Terence. Yes, thank you. Get thee to a punnery. Margaret in Birmingham says, Starmer at the dispatch box is such an embarrassment. No leadership skills whatsoever. How can he sit there and never answer a question? He knows by May the 8th he will be on his way out of number 10. What a legacy. Worst PM in history, says Margaret. And Penny in Essex says, hi Peter, praying in Trafalgar Square with hundreds of Muslims is wrong. Sorry, but if hundreds of Christians were praying like that and praying like that in an Islamic country, it would not be tolerated. That is fact, says Penny in Essex. Well, it wouldn't, but maybe it's better that we as a tolerant country allow that to happen. I mean, I wonder, actually, can I ask the debate desk panel, do you think it's an act of domination? Do you think Nick Timothy was right to say that? Have you got any problem with Muslims praying in Trafalgar Square, Elliot?
I mean, the first thing is he had every right to say that.
Yeah, it's his opinion.
And the reaction to it does show that there is a hostility.
Sack him, cancel him, says Starmer.
And I think that's the first thing to say. Starmer claims that his new definition of Islamophobia would not ban criticism of Islam, and yet he's sort of expressing that it might. But the other thing is the Islam call to prayer is to say there is no God but God, and Muhammad is the messenger. It is quite a clear and unequivocal statement.
Most other faiths say they're the only faith.
Yeah, true, but they don't.
Catholics say we're the one true faith.
They don't congregate in Trafalgar Square.
Sometimes they do. There've been other
to be fair, in the run-up to Easter, there will hopefully be many parishes where there will be processions echoing the
pilgrimage of Jesus.
The pilgrimage of Jesus in that week before.
You're so godless, Lucy.
I know,
you just didn't remember.
Faithless.
Just didn't remember.
But it has a donkey. That's all I remember, is that most churches try to get hold of a donkey for the...
As well they should. Well, that's Palm Sunday.
Exactly, it's Palm Sunday. Thank you. I only went to a church school. Much good it did me. But yes, the public expression of your faith is a really powerful part of it, because you want to feel that you are bearing witness to a particular faith. And I think what Nick Timothy said was incorrect, but it is his opinion. And I thought the whole idea was that because there was now an anti-Muslim czar, that it was going to be okay that you could say things and debate about it.
There's Keir Starmer from the dispatch box saying that Kemi Badenoch has to sack him, and he says, "Oh, if he was my minister, my justice guy, I'd sack him." Well, what does it take?
And then you'd flip-flop on it.
Well, what does Keir Starmer actually have to do? Because he won't answer a clear question about Mandelson. So much more to discuss. Stay with us on the debate desk here on Talk. Stay with us in just a moment. We will come back with more from Elliot and Lucy. Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk. Thanks to Joe, who says, who's from Shrewsbury, saying, regarding the Albanian who was granted asylum in the UK because his son can only eat UK chicken nuggets, are those chicken nuggets halal in accordance with their religious beliefs, or is it a load of testicles? Alex in Cardiff says, I'm not interested in talking about Starmer and Angela Rayner. They're not worth the bandwidth in my mind for a completely hopeless Prime Minister. He's just so weak, says Alex. He's at the mercy of his cabinet, but he generally wants illegal immigrants, really, so he can keep Hermer and other human rights lawyers so they can make money. He's a traitor to our country, says Alex. Certainly Richard Hermer is a big fan of human rights law, no doubt about that. Ivor in Chelmsford says, does everyone realise that if they ditch Shabbat Mahmood's plan to extend indefinite leave to remain, this means that the million plus who were granted it during the Boris wave will have citizenship by the next election and will be able to vote. No wonder Labour MPs want to change it. Well, let's talk about another Prime Minister. This is Benjamin Netanyahu, who is the Prime Minister of Israel. He has been speaking in the last sort of hour or so. This is what he's been saying about the conflict in Iran.
I think what is also good for future generations. In this case, those interests are absolutely clear, and so is the clarity of our achievements. Together in close coordination with President Trump, the close coordination between America and Israel, our militaries, our intelligence services, we're achieving goals in lightning speed. But I want to say another word. It's been said that for 40 years, I've been saying that Iran is a danger to Israel and a danger to the world.
So he said there are sort of three aims that he wants to do. He's talked about the problems here. He said that Trump tells Israel not to, well, we know that Trump has told Israel not to strike Iranian energy sites as well. There's a lot in this statement and in this press conference from Benjamin Netanyahu, and he said that he wants to completely annihilate Iran's nuclear program, to completely annihilate Iran's ballistic missile program, and to create conditions that allow Iranians to take their fate into their own hands. Lucy, we're in week 3 of the war. Your thoughts?
Well, I did wonder whether Benjamin Netanyahu was saying, I'm working in close coordination with Donald Trump, specifically to counter this comment that was made by Trump late last night, early this morning, which is that they didn't know that Israel was going to bomb the oil facility in Qatar. And that there does seem to be, now we are 3 weeks in, and if you like, that the first wave has finished, where are the fissures, where are the fractures, either within the MAGA camp or between Israel and America? And I think now we're seeing a little bit of jockeying for position as to whose side people are on. And that what you want is a united front. If I was Benjamin Netanyahu, I would want to give the impression that I'm completely surrounded by allies and they support everything I do. And that didn't come across last night from Trump's words. So that's, in a way, the main thing that I've taken away from that comment today. It's like, oh no, actually I do have allies and they're right behind me.
Elliot?
Oh, listen, I mean, during wars, there's always disagreements and tensions between allies. That's completely normal. No two allies will have the exact same military strategy. No two allies will have the exact same war aims and methods. So, you know, it's not a surprise that there has been a disagreement over Israel's decision to bomb the oil and gas fields in Iran. That's not a surprise. But I think, you know, the ultimate reality is now that the Israelis and the United States have decided to destroy the Iranian regime, destroy its capabilities, this war has some way to go. There's no point in starting this war if you're not going to finish it. And in terms of the ultimate aims, listen, I would love to see regime change in Iran. Of course, anybody would.
But the gas field, Israel, it seems Israel acted alone, though.
It does, absolutely, yeah. But the point is there's never been a war where two allies have acted in perfect concert. It's just never.
Although, to be fair, I think the Washington Post actually this morning hinted that Donald Trump did know about it and gave a sanction for that, and then saw quite what a mess it made of the price of oil.
And may have perhaps moved back from that position.
That is also possible.
Yeah, very interesting. It's interesting with Trump, just before we go on to the British view on this and the reopening of the Strait of Hormuz, I just want to play this incident when he was talking to the Japanese Prime Minister. Not the most diplomatic of Donald Trump's utterances, perhaps.
One thing you don't want to signal too much, you know, when we go in, we went in very hard and we didn't tell anybody about it because we wanted surprise. Who knows better about surprise than Japan? Okay? Why didn't you tell me about Pearl Harbor? Okay? Right? You know, he's asking me, do you believe in surprise? I think much more so than us.
Lucy, tell us about the body language.
Oh, it's excruciating. The poor Japanese Prime Minister, who's just won, you know, an incredible election. She must be feeling like she's got a lot of potency, but she is so small and shriveled on that chair, and she just wants the chair to swallow her up.
Yeah.
And actually, it's so interesting because when Trump says, "Who knows better than surprise to Japan?" lots of people in the room laugh, but they clearly can't know why he's saying that, and then the diminished amount of laughter when he comes up with the punchline is really painful to hear. Is
anybody safe from Trump's punchlines and words? Because we saw another very awkward leader was Micheál Martin on Tuesday, the Taoiseach, the Irish Prime Minister, who was sitting there as Trump was slagging off Starmer, and he looked very, very awkward there. I mean, I was on air for 6 hours almost continuously when Zelensky went into the Oval Office when that happened as well. So, I mean, what do you make of this?
Yeah, I think sometimes the President Trump does say things in order to humiliate the person that he's in the room with, in order to demonstrate a sort of power move. I actually think on this occasion he was just trying to be funny, because the reality, it was a funny joke. You know, if
not for her.
No, not for her. But if someone said that at a pub, you know, at a pub, you know, with their sort of Japanese friends.
But this is the Oval Office.
This is the thing. Yeah, I'm not saying it was a well-timed joke or it was an appropriate joke. I'm saying that I don't think in this occasion he was doing it to try and humiliate her. I think it genuinely came from a humorous point, and he was trying to crack a bit of banter. And the interesting thing was, when he initially said, you know, who knows is better about surprise than the Japanese, everyone laughed because the punchline was sort of implied. But then when he made the punchline
he
really
just went a little bit beyond. But he always goes a bit beyond, doesn't he?
It was a bit like, yeah, we got the joke, you didn't need to spell it out.
Nigel Farage is often called Trumpian. Do you think he would do this if he became Prime Minister and met the Prime Minister of Japan?
In the sense that he might be a liability. Well, the thing about Nigel Farage is that people like his authenticity.
Yes.
And that is such a key component of politics nowadays, and that sense of not censoring yourself and not using diplomatic language. And as I said before, you know, if you can fake authenticity, then you've completely got it made. Nigel Farage would probably know. He would know, though, that it would just be that cringe moment for the British press, and he probably wouldn't go that far.
The poor old Japanese Prime Minister, she was having a whole body cringe there, wasn't she? She was quite cringing. Lots of people getting in touch, including Simon. He says, let's hope Netanyahu does stop blowing Iranian oil fields to hell. It will cost us a fortune. Nat has been in touch from Tel Aviv and says, of course Trump knew. R&B, presumably people, that's their initials rather than the music genre in general, getting in touch. Aren't all these men praying in London just upset because their true all-powerful God is getting his backside kicked in Iran by Trump? Jews and many other infidels. It must be a dreadful reality for Mayor Khan and his followers. Well, I don't think Mayor Khan supports the Iranian regime, but I would like to hear a lot more from him when it came to the Al-Quds protest and also the pro-Palestinian marches in London, which have an awful lot of people who do support the Iranian regime and Hamas and Hezbollah and lots of other horrible outfits. Gavin in Leeds says Christian festivals have been under attack for years from local councils saying lights and trees are not inclusive and cause offence. So how does mass prayer in a very public place like Trafalgar Square not come under the same scrutiny? Clearly a lot of people want to talk about that. Lucy, have you a thought?
Well, what I would say is lights and trees isn't necessarily a Christian thing. It's a Christmas thing, which is completely different. And it plays, unfortunately, into the commercialisation of Christmas, and that's what a lot of people resent. I think the way in which Christianity has been attacked in this country is a slightly different issue, but for sure it does feel that you're allowed to criticise other faiths, but you're not allowed to criticise
absolutely.
Islam.
And Nick Timothy, who was doing that, the Shadow Justice Secretary, he should be allowed his free speech just as much as anybody else, especially when he's saying things which are illegal to say. The Prime Minister may disagree with them, but should he be sacked as a result? What do you think? 0344 499 1000. We'll talk about the British plan to go to the Straits of Hormuz and about the man who has parked his car in every car parking space, apart from the disabled ones, in his local Sainsbury's. We'll be chatting to him later in the programme, but we'll get Lucy and Elliot's thoughts on this in just a moment.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thank you to Linda from Worcestershire, who says Lucy describes the Christian Easter tradition of processions through parishes. Precisely, they are through parishes, not 3,000 people in Trafalgar Square. This is a Christian country, and in my opinion, the only public displays of religion must be Christian. We currently have Christian preachers being arrested on the street because some offended Muslim had complained to the police. Christians being arrested for silent prayer. Other religions should practice their faith within their spaces of worship and in their home. We are in this complete mess of a situation because we have been too tolerant of the intolerant. The old but true phrase that I grew up with, give them an inch and they'll take a mile and we'll keep on taking, was used to describe anyone taking the mickey, is very apt. Linda, I'm not sure we are a Christian country anymore. I mean, we are, as we are set up. The Archbishop of Canterbury, who's nowhere to be seen when there's a debate about assisted dying, she's doing a pilgrimage at the moment. But in terms of people who actually go to a Christian church on a Sunday regularly, I'm not just talking about Easter and Christmas or weddings and baptisms and things like that. I'm talking about people who actively practice their faith. Are we actually a Christian country, or are we a country where there are probably more practicing Muslims, for example? There are more Muslims in this country than there are Welsh people, for example, in the UK. If you talk about people practicing their religion, is it actually a Christian country? Also, you say Christians being arrested for silent prayer. Now, I think you're referencing, and forgive me if I'm not, Linda, I'm not having a go at you at all, but I think you're referencing the person who was in an abortion exclusion zone. It's not. If I go outside this building and start praying silently, no one's going to arrest me. They're probably going to think I'm a bit strange, or why have I got my eyes closed, but they're not actually going to arrest me for doing that. So the person who was arrested for silent prayer was in an abortion clinic exclusion zone, and that was the law. I'm not saying that's right or wrong, I'm just saying there's a bit of context to that. I love Donald's comment on Pearl Harbor, says Simon in Durham. He's 100% full-on great entertainment, one of the most, if not the most original person to grace the political sphere. We will miss him when he's gone. God bless the Orange Man, says Simon in Durham. Not sure the Prime Minister of Japan quite feels the same way. And Terence, wow, okay, we're getting a bit dark here. Terence says, I wish the Japanese Prime Minister had quipped back at Trump and said, not as big a surprise as Hiroshima. So yeah, I think jokes about Hiroshima perhaps not great, but it would have been quite the comeback if she had said that. Let's talk about the Navy and whether they will send ships to the Middle East. They say they don't want to because the situation is fluid. We've got the statement from 5 other nations ready to contribute to ensuring safe passage through the Straits of Hormuz: France, Germany, Italy, the Netherlands, Japan and the UK. Joint statement. Why do we keep having these joint statements? Why can't Keir Starmer just talk for this country? He says, we express our readiness to contribute to appropriate efforts to ensure safe passage through the Strait. Good idea? Bad idea? Elliot?
That's a good idea. I mean, listen, 20% of the world's oil and gas goes through the Straits of Hormuz. It's the one stranglehold that the Iranians have over the global economy. It's the one thing that they can use to make the military action as painful as possible. So anything that can be done to ameliorate the impacts and to reduce the effectiveness of their military their actions, I think is absolutely a good idea.
Lucy?
And I think the reason why it has to be a joint statement is that we would carry no weight just on our own. We are such a diminished power.
That's
really.
a very interesting point.
But at the same time, you do want to give the impression there are loads of us who disagree with you, Iran, and we're all going to be fighting against you. That's kind of safety in numbers thing is very important.
We'll talk more about the war with a couple of guests, actually. Ralph Scholhammer, I'll get his views on it as well. Also, Sir William Patey is coming up a little bit later. He is the former UK ambassador to Afghanistan, Sudan, Saudi Arabia, Iraq, and unsurprisingly, he's listed here as a Middle East affairs expert. I would expect he would be after all of that. Tell us, Elliot, about the jails watchdog who are deeply concerned over the risk to the public as dangerous criminals have been released from high security prisons.
Yeah, I mean, this is an extraordinary story, and we've obviously known for a long time that we don't build enough prisons in this country. There was a point when the Labour government came to power and I think there was only 100 prison spaces left. I think the last Conservative government added only about 1,500 net.
It wasn't even as many as that, it was about 500.
Oh, well, there we go.
Over the course of 14 years, massive failure.
Yeah.
I mean, they closed a lot of prisons. I was in the Ministry of Justice for 6 months and had like a role in this, but perhaps not a big one. But nonetheless, they just didn't build enough prisons. And they closed a lot of prisons. They said, Boris Johnson came in, I remember it was kind of my first week or something, and said, we're going to build 20,000 new prison places. We all thought, great, this is fantastic. But actually, you're closing a lot of prisons as well. And the net gain after 14 years was 500 prison places.
Yeah, and the problem, I mean, the cost of additional prison place in this country is absolutely extraordinary. I was looking into it actually quite recently, and it's about 500 to 700,000 pounds for every additional prison space in this country. Now, I mean, I don't think El Salvador is a real model that we can use, but by comparison, the El Salvadorian prison that they built, I think it's called CENTCOM, was about £2,500 per prison space. Now, obviously, the conditions
there's something in the middle.
Not ones we can end with, but something in the middle.
It shouldn't cost £500,000 per prison place.
We're
that's
probably
absurd.
looking in the middle.
Yeah.
It is absurd. The more troubling thing for me is the state of the prisons that do exist and the amount of crime that's actually going on in the prisons.
And the gangs.
The gangs, the drones that are flying in drugs, the real difficulty that the prison governors and the staff have to actually have control over their own domain is really quite upsetting. And given that there is also another story about David Lammy and what he wants to do in terms of the judicial review, I think we're reaching a crisis point within prisons. We haven't got enough places for the people who really should be in prison, and you do wonder whether some of what David Lammy is doing is simply to prevent more people going into prison, which would be another...
Oh, certainly. There's absolutely no doubt about that. What do you make about the claim that biased male judges will discriminate against women under those plans? Tell us about that.
Well, David Lammy, he's always being urged to abandon this plan to cut jury trials, and the latest people who've come out against him are organisations that are very firmly focused on women's needs. So you've got the Centre of Women's Justice and the Susie Lamplugh Trust, which is a story for my generation of women, which still kind of sends a shiver down your spine in terms of abuse against women.
What happened to Susie Lamplugh?
So she was an estate agent, went out to meet a client called Mr. Kipper and never came back. Right. And she's a missing person still to this day, and her mother set up this trust to, in a way, give support to families that have had violence and domestic abuse against women, but also women who've been disappeared, one might argue. My problem, and this is where I'm going to sound like I kind of don't know what I want, I do want jury trials to still exist. David Lammy is only looking to remove them for sentences that would be for 3 years or less.
That's a lot of cases, though.
But that is a lot of cases, and the problem is, the more worrying thing is that justice kind of delayed is justice denied, and there are too many cases, particularly rape trials, that never come to court at all. So whether it gets a jury trial or not a jury trial, that's not happening. And I fear that that's letting women down more than these proposed changes.
It absolutely is. I will ever so slightly defend the Crown Prosecution Service in this, in that a lot of people pull out of those trials. But part of it is how long it takes. If you've got to tell your story over and over again and you're not going to get a court date for 3 years...
And you don't want to relive that trauma, because it is going to be traumatic.
Yes.
And that's why the delay is so... It's criminal in its own way. But this argument is that one of the reasons why you shouldn't go down the route of eliminating jury trials is because it's thought that perhaps male judges or judges that just don't have experience of women's issues would be more likely to not convict, and that would be, again, justice denied.
I agree with that as well, and I will just say that the Crown Prosecution Service, there are some very, very good lawyers who work on rape cases, and I know that there's a lot of effort to make sure those are done correctly, but it does take far too long. That's not their fault necessarily. There aren't nearly enough of them, but the ones that are there, some of them are very, very good, I know, and work extremely hard.
But as I've said to you on this show before, one of the things that David Lammy could do is completely overhaul the legal day. So the fact that these days often only start at 10 or 11 o'clock at night and they finish at 4 and there's a break for lunch, you could easily, I come from an investment banking background. If you weren't at your desk at 7:30 and you weren't there when it came to 11 o'clock, then in effect you weren't doing your job.
Yeah, certainly. And I'm not saying that people necessarily have to do those hours, but there's a lot more that could be done.
But you could do it on rotation. You could actually, you've got this building and it's basically dark for 2/3 of the day.
Yes.
And that just is unacceptable.
I totally agree with you. Elliot, I know you're very keen to talk about the main story about car parks. So quite the gear shift, pun intended, to car parks. Tell us about the man we're going to speak to later, who is surname Wild by name, Wild by nature, Gareth, who we'll be speaking to a little bit later on in the programme. What's he done?
Well, God forbid a man has a hobby, eh? So he's decided to try and park, was it 208 prison, not prison places, parking places at
We've moved on from that story.
Yeah, exactly, at his local Sainsbury's. Yes. And the fascinating thing is it wasn't just about completing all the parking spaces. He's recorded data, he's done analysis, and he's done reviews. But what I find really bizarre, and this is something you could have predicted at the start, is it turns out the two best places at his local Sainsbury's car park are the two places closest to the entrance.
No.
And I mean,
I couldn't have predicted that.
But it's good to have that confirmed, because I've always tried to park at the closest point to the entrance, but I've never actually done a sophisticated analysis. To have that
he's got three categories: God tier, useful, and avoid, with his favourite two being A1 and A2 right by the entrance. I mean, you meet a lot of weird and wonderful people over your career, not least in this studio, Lucy, but I mean, if you had a client who was, as a psychotherapist, who was doing something like this, how would you evaluate that client?
I would just say, why don't you go to Waitrose and have valet parking?
It's a fair point. It's a fair point.
I love it. It's like cricketers. As someone who used to score for a cricket team and was sitting in the box with the men who had different coloured pencils for different bowlers and different batsmen and different dots. This is very similar because he's got all the data. He's kind of evaluated it, not just on the type of parking, but he's also done it for a second. Sainsbury's, when he moved house. As he said, I think I was a bit bored at the beginning, and that might be my clinical assessment.
The interesting thing is, as well, is that he's taken his kids, 6 and 9 years old, and he says this is probably the last year he could get away with parking in the family spaces. I know you're a driver, Lucy. Are you a driver, Elliot, or not?
Yeah.
You are a driver. Yeah. So what do you look for in a parking space?
As I said, proximity to the entrance of the supermarket.
But it's interesting. I know someone. There's someone in my life who shall remain nameless who is very fit and healthy, walks 2 miles a day, but will go round and round and round and round the car park to find, the closest possible spot to the supermarket, which I find completely crazy.
No, but you do, because it's a time efficiency thing. You don't want to be in that space.
Not if you're going round and round the car park. I mean, that's not particularly time efficient.
But what? So is this man kind of only trying to find a parking space for his kids? Because
no, it's
those
all of
ones
them.
are always wider, and then you've got more space, and that's just really jammy. If you've got, I mean, there are some underground parking spaces for small supermarkets in the centre of London, and how much money you waste getting your bumper refitted every time you smash into the pillar. I'm just asking for a friend. You kind of, the luxury of being able to open your door would be wonderful.
Do you know when the last time I did a parallel park was? During my driving test. Yes, really. I'm not the world's best. I'm quite a good driver. I'm quite safe, quite boring.
But you have no sense of direction.
I have no sense of direction. Yeah. Sat-nav's was all four. No, I have absolutely no sense of direction. When I was a reporter, it was my #1 problem was I had absolutely no sense of direction. People in Belfast, where I was mostly a reporter, would sort of look at you and go, "How do you not know where this is?"
Belfast, it can be quite important to have a sense of direction where you're going. Whether you end up on the Shankill or the Falls Road.
I'm just grateful that this story is driving the news agenda.
Driving the news agenda. See what you did there. Puns aplenty from Lucy Beresford and Elliot Keck on the debate desk. Thank you both very much indeed. Lucy is a psychotherapist and author and broadcaster, and Elliot is head of campaigns at the Taxpayers Alliance. Thanks for joining us on the debate desk. Loads more to come. Ralph Schulhammer's coming up in a moment on his views on migration and indeed on everything else to do with the world and what the war is happening in Iran. So much to discuss. Stay with us here on Talk.
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thank you so much to everybody who's been in touch. We'll get to more of your calls, texts, tweets and voice notes between now and 10 o'clock. Keep your calls coming in, 0344 499 1000. We'll talk about the situation in the world, Iran and what happens and what Britain does, whether we should be ready to contribute to ensuring safe passage through the Strait of Hormuz. France, Germany, Italy, the Netherlands, Japan and the UK have released a joint statement saying we express our readiness to contribute to appropriate efforts to ensure safe passage through the Strait. We'll talk to Ralph Schulhammer about that, one of my most popular guests. We'll also talk about the fact that immigration in this country seems under threat. Starmer signalling a migrant U-turn after pressure from Rayner, and also the criminal migrant allowed to stay in Britain after fighting deportation by arguing his son disliked chicken nuggets. Yes, really, this is where we are in Britain in 2026, and people wonder why there is no faith in the system. We'll also talk about an absolutely another horrendous video from Ireland, another St Patrick's Day parade. You may remember, if you were watching my afternoon show yesterday, I was sitting in for Ian Collins, exactly what happened, and there was this horrible video of a sort of tableau, a pastiche of Epstein and Andrew. Now there's another one I'm going to show you in about 15 or 20 minutes time. Also, ghoulish influencers have flocked to Jeffrey Epstein's notorious pedo island to film content that has become a smash hit with YouTube viewers. Honestly, what on earth are people doing and why are they doing it? It's very, very strange. I want to speak to as many people as possible, and a particular appeal really for voice notes to come through, 0344 499 1000 for phone calls. You can text me at 72222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV, follow me at Peter Cardwell. You can send me a voice note less than a minute please on 0344 499 1000. Ring me on that number or send me a WhatsApp text message. So much to discuss between now and 10 o'clock. Stay with us here on Talk. We're also talking about the story about the car parking spaces, and Grant's been in touch and says the bored dad, 218 car parking spaces. Why not do something with your child or children as you're a dad? Well, it doesn't take much time to go into another car parking space, of course, and he did bring his kids with him to do the weekly shop, and sometimes when you're a kid you should be bored. I think kids are given far too much stimulation. We are a Christian country, says Dawn. Debate about this as well, but the Church of England suffers from weak leadership. I thought Archbishop Welby was ineffective, but his successor is practically anonymous. Well, it's really interesting you mentioned that, Dawn, because there's a big debate in the House of Lords this week about assisted suicide. It's been rejected in Scotland by the Scottish Parliament, but we know that in Westminster there is a debate in the House of Lords about the assisted dying legislation. One would imagine that the apparent spiritual leader of Christianity in this country, Dame Sarah Mullally, who's the Archbishop of Canterbury, would want to be there. But no, she's on a pilgrimage. She's walking between London and Canterbury, which to me seems a bit weird. Not as an idea, fine to do a pilgrimage. Christ did those, that's fine. But at this exact moment, when the sanctity of life is being discussed in the House of Lords, well, perhaps she should be there. Let's speak to Ralph Schulhammer now, political theorist and professor at Webster University in Vienna. Hi, Ralph. How are you doing? How are things?
Hey, Peter. Great to talk to you. And I know it's about time that we finally talk in person again very soon.
Yes, I hope to see you on this side of the English Channel before too long. I know we're going to talk about migration. Starmer here appears to be on the brink of perhaps another U-turn on migration, a toughened up policy. From where you're sitting, what do you think?
Well, I mean, there is a great piece by Alexis de Tocqueville, right, the great French analyst of democracy in the 19th century, and he made this interesting observation. It says tyranny in a democracy is not the jackboots, slamming in your door. It is more that the government gets in the way. It innovates. It creates a sense of hopelessness, of helplessness, and I think this is a little bit what's going on in the West at the moment, including the UK. I mean, we know for a fact that since the late 1960s, 60s, everybody or a significant majority wants restrictions on migration, and it's just never happening. It's always going back and forth. Yes, we'll do something. Oh, we can't do this because of the Human Rights Convention and the European Court of Human Rights. But now we're really going to do something. And then yet we expand student visas to the Middle East and to Africa. So it's always a back and forth, but the ultimate result is always more migration, and it's always more migration from the places the British people don't want it.
Yes, and that is so often the case, as you say. When you look, I mean, I know you look at politics right across Europe. How big is immigration in other countries as well? Because it seems it's a very, very important issue to our viewers and listeners, but certainly Keir Starmer doesn't see reform of immigration as a priority to the same degree as other countries seem to, and certainly to the same degree as the Reform UK leader Nigel Farage and Conservative leader Kemi Badenoch say they would.
Well, I think that most people are actually not opposed to immigration. They're opposed to a specific kind of immigration. I mean, Peter, look at our conversation. I'm a foreigner, and you started our conversation with, so Ralph, when you're going to come back over the channel to us? And I'm sure that, I hope at least, that many of your viewers would welcome me visiting the UK.
Of course, you're always welcome here.
Well, there you go. So it's not that the people are against immigration or against other people visiting your country. They're against a cultural and social transformation. And that is what is currently happening. And this is where the left plays a very interesting game. They say, oh, you're against foreigners, you're xenophobic. No. People just want to keep England distinctively English, and there's nothing wrong with this. I saw a picture, the last public appearance of Winston Churchill in November 1964. It's a beautiful picture. Now he's looking out of his window with his wife. And I wonder, what would he think today if he would look out the random window in London and he would look at London as it looks today? Would he think that all his efforts of saving it, he failed saving the British Empire, but I mean, he did save Great Britain during the war. Would he say it was worth it, or would he say, man, at some point really took a wrong turn? And I think it would be the latter and not the former. And this is the big thing, Peter. Mass migration, as it at the moment takes place, it doesn't just cost you your future, it also costs you your past. Because all of a sudden, language, people don't speak English as well as they did in the past, which means they can no longer read the English classics. It means that the next generation has less of respect for previous fantastic figures of British history. This is why they do deface, for example, statues of Winston Churchill and so on and so on. So we're not just losing the future, we're also losing the past. And this also means, of course, that at some point we lose the present as well.
Very interesting you say that, because we're having a bit of a debate on this programme tonight about whether Britain is actually a Christian country. Elisa in Chelmsford's been in touch and says, of course we're a Christian country. We don't have to go to church to be a Christian. The thing is, for how much longer? And actually, the Shadow Justice Secretary, a man called Nick Timothy, is under fire, certainly from Prime Minister Keir Starmer, after he said that he believed that hundreds of Muslims praying openly and praying in public on Trafalgar Square, bang in the centre of London, was something that was an act of domination, as he put it. And Keir Starmer said he should resign for that. Quite a number of people have been in touch about that throughout the show on their thoughts on that. Now, Trafalgar Square has been used for Christian ceremonies, Jewish ceremonies, Hindu ceremonies, all sorts of religions. And my view is, I think, that I'm not sure it's something that I would actively encourage, and I certainly don't want segregation. We can only see in what's on the screen at the moment men, and men and women are, oh no, sorry, there are some women on the screen there, but men and women are generally separated when they worship in Islam. Having a mass prayer event for people peacefully observing the faith of Islam, does that worry you?
Well, it's peaceful, but it's also a demonstration of strength. And it is an occupation of the public space, right? I mean, invasion can take many forms. So it can be the traditional kind of, armed men crossing the border. But it can always also be kind of an ideological invasion that...
it's not invasion to pray, is it?
If you do it in public in that way, yes, it is. Okay, oh, absolutely. It's occupation of public space. What do you mean? Well, because the thing is, it's a complete difference if I execute my faith at home or in church or in a place of worship. If I, which is also happening in Paris and partially in Rome as well, where I just came back from, if I basically have to stop traffic in order to have to execute or to express my faith, if I basically inconvenience a significant part of the native population to show my faith, of course that is a form of occupation. It is a form of invasion, absolutely. This is not necessary. Like, you don't have to do this in public. But it's also, by the way, a sign of disrespect. You don't have to be Christian to be British, but there is no doubt that Britain or England is a country with Christian roots.
Would it be a sign of disrespect if, for example, Jews prayed in Trafalgar Square, Christians prayed in Trafalgar Square, Hindus prayed in Trafalgar Square? Would there be a difference? Would that be an act of domination?
Of course there's a difference. If Christians would do it in a Christian country, I don't really see that much of a problem with it.
We're not a Jewish country, though. We're not a Hindu country.
Well, I don't know. Have there been cases where masses of Jews have been doing the same thing in Trafalgar Square?
They've been. I actually went to a very, very good gathering of Jewish people. They lit a menorah candle in Trafalgar Square. It's a public space.
Fine, if somebody lights a candle, fine. If my point is, if I have to basically stop traffic, and as I said before, but I would be as critical there as well. Yes, I think it's within a state, not all religions, not all cultures are equal. There has to be a dominant role for the very culture and partially also the very religion that is at the foundation, at the roots of said state, of said society. I don't believe in the neutral state. I don't think the state should be neutral. I would never demand, if I traveled to the Middle East, that I would have the right or the obligation to express my faith in public there.
Okay. Speaking of the Middle East, the Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, has been talking about coordination with Trump. I'm really interested to get your views on Iran and what's happening there, Ralph. So let's just have a look at what Benjamin Netanyahu's been saying in the last kind of 90 minutes or so.
I think what is also good for future generations. In this case, those interests are absolutely clear, and so is the clarity of our achievements. Together in close coordination with President Trump, the close coordination between America and Israel, our militaries, our intelligence services, we're achieving goals in lightning speed. But I want to say another word. It's been said that for 40 years, I've been saying that Iran is a danger to Israel and a danger to the world.
Very interesting to hear from Netanyahu today. What do you make of what he's saying, and what do you make of this plan by 6 different nations, the UK, France, Germany, Italy, the Netherlands and Japan, who say they're ready to contribute to ensure safe passage through the Strait of Hormuz? Ralph?
Well, let me put it this way. There's the argument that this is not Europe's war, that this is not the UK's war. And that is partially true. But there's the famous saying by Trotsky, right? You might not be interested in war, but war is interested in you. And this is true there as well, because we feel the consequences of the war. So if there is a way that Europeans can contribute to bring this to an end quicker and thereby limits the negative impact from the consequences, I think that might be a good thing. As I said, right, I mean, we can have a debate. I think the United States doing this without coordination with the Europeans was a diplomatic mistake. I agree when people in Britain and continental Europe say this is not our war. I agree with this as well. But if you're affected by the consequences, you can still be forced to do something about it. So even if you take, so to speak, the moral high ground and say, oh, I don't want to have anything to do with it, that's an interesting moral position, but it is not, let's say, a very smart economic and geopolitical position. So if we can reopen the Strait of Hormuz, right, if we can ensure that this conflict ends rather sooner than later, I think that would be maybe the unpopular, but I think it would be the right decision.
Ralph, always good to talk to you. Always interesting to hear what you have to say.
Peter.
Hopefully see you in London soon. That's Ralph Schulhammer, who's a political theorist and professor at Webster University in Vienna. Simon in West Lancashire says, hi Peter, do you think Starmer ever wanted to be Prime Minister? He seems to have agreed to be presented as a respectable face of a rebranded Labour Party. Was the post-Corbyn rabid anti-Semitism ever really purged, or was it hidden until the election victory? Ironically, I don't believe he has any real entrenched political beliefs. He seems to be a happy governing by committee, a kind, nice man meets the Manchurian candidate. Perhaps a little bit far, Simon. The man with no political will or instincts, and I'd rather he went, so we can all see what's truly behind the Labour curtain. Great show, says Simon in West Lancashire. Simon, thanks for that. Lots in that, actually. I do believe that I will rarely praise Keir Starmer, but he did take action on the horrendous anti-Semitism that was in the Labour Party under Jeremy Corbyn, who was appalling, absolutely appalling, and I believe, in my strongly held personal belief, an anti-Semite himself. I think there's a lot of evidence that suggests that. The problem, I suppose, is for Starmer, what does he actually believe? And if you read really, really good book, in fact, it's just out in paperback, Patrick Maguire and Gabriel Pogren, it's called Get In, and it gives you the whole story of how Starmer came to power, and he was essentially chosen by Morgan McSweeney, Lisa Nandy, people like Steve Reid and a few others. They said, right, we need someone who can bring this project forward, a sort of credible candidate. Right, we're choosing him. Lisa Nandy thought it would be her. But it's a really, really interesting book, and it sort of answers a lot of those questions, actually, about his lack of political will or instincts. And actually the updated bits, which I've read, they're serialised, I think, in the Sunday Times, talking about Patrick's been, both of them, Patrick and Gabriel, both of them been on this programme, on my programmes previously, talking about how Keir Starmer reads, but never seems to have an opinion on anything. And the point with the Prime Minister is you've got to lead. A leader has to lead. You've got to have opinions and stuff. You've got to make decisions about things all the time, and they're usually quite finely balanced things. Ivor says Trump talking to the Japanese Prime Minister was as cringy as Basil Fawlty's Don't Mention the War with the Germans. Can we watch this clip again, actually? This is Trump making a joke about Pearl Harbor, and if you are watching, I know a lot of people are listening, but if you are watching, just look at the Japanese Prime Minister cringing.
One thing you don't want to signal too much, you know, when we go in, we went in very hard, and we didn't tell anybody about it because we wanted surprise. Who knows better about surprise than Japan? Okay? Why didn't you tell me about Pearl Harbor? Okay? Right? You know, he's asking me, do you believe in surprise? I think much more so than us.
There's a sort of audible there when she clearly wasn't massively happy at the fact that Donald Trump had said that. But listen, Donald Trump never fails to make the news. He never fails to give us things to talk about. Another thing we're going to talk about in a second, and I want your views on this, and please do give me a ring on 0344 499 1000 or send me a voice note to that number as well, is this, when I was on, you might remember yesterday, if you're watching the afternoon programme, there was this awful video, we're going to show it to you again, of what happened, a sort of pastiche of Epstein on a St. Patrick's Day parade with children present who were given sweets. We'll show you that again if you missed it yesterday. And there's a new one as well, which is similarly bad, which happened at another parade in Ireland as well, another St. Patrick's Day parade, where they have these floats, nothing to do with St. Patrick, deeply, deeply offensive. And Marilyn Hawes, who's the Chief Executive of Freedom from Abuse, will speak to us in just a second about it. Also, the fact that people are going to Pedo Island, as it's sometimes known, Jeffrey Epstein's notorious island, to film content, these influencers. Why? Honestly, and it's so awful for people who've been through so much. Stay with us to talk about that in just a second here on Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Don is in Chelmsford and says, has Starmer joined yet another coalition of the willing by vowing to intervene at the Straits of Hormuz? I hope it gets better than his Ukrainian strategy. Thank you to this person who says, another great show, thank you. I tell people that Keir Starmer looks and acts like a pair of wet underpants. I can't wait for him to go. We need a government in power that actually cares about British people and stands together with our American allies. So thank you to that person. And Pete says, it's not an invasion to pray when you're a single Christian, so why do single Christian preachers get arrested while hundreds of Muslims pray in the street and it's okay? And on the car parking story, this person says, much like crime in a multi-story car park, this car parking story is wrong on so many levels. That is a very good joke. That is funny. What isn't funny at all is what has been happening in Ireland, in two different parts of Ireland. On Wednesday, so St Patrick's Day was on Tuesday, National Day of Ireland, obviously, 17th of March. People have a glass of Guinness and say Happy St Patrick's Day. All marvellous, absolutely fine, completely harmless activity, all good. The problem is that these parades happen in various towns, and it's a family day out. Kids have the day off school because it's St Patrick's Day, and many kids go to these things, families, and think they have a good time. Most people do have a good time. Yesterday, I was on between 1 and 4 filling in for Ian Collins, and in Ballinrobe in County Mayo, this happened. So I'm just going to describe this for people who are perhaps listening on the radio. This is children who are waiting with their little flags, their Irish flags. They're being given sweets on the side of the road. Those are being handed out by a man walking along. And then a tractor comes along with Epstein files on the front of it. There's a black man chasing after a white woman. Then there are people on a bed simulating a rape, yes, really, of someone there. And then police officers, people dressed up as police officers, who are putting someone, apparently Jeffrey Epstein or Prince Andrew, into a little makeshift jail. I mean, it is beyond tasteless. It is absolutely beyond tasteless. It's not funny. Children are watching it. It is absolutely horrendous. And if you're someone, as statistically, there will be people watching that who were on Tuesday watching the St Patrick's Day parade who've been victims of sexual violence. Do they think that's funny? Well, I thought that was terrible. We had a very, very interesting discussion about it yesterday. And now another video has emerged, this time from Headford in County Galway, another part of Ireland. And this happened. I'll talk you through this one. So this is another sort of lorry this time, and on the back of it is someone asking, this is secret island, secret files, all sorts of people who appear to be having very, very sexual gestures. It appears to be a disabled person who someone is simulating a sex act with. There's someone who is dressed as Jeffrey Epstein, who's on a little boat being dragged along. At the bottom of it, a fishing trip. I mean, why on earth would anybody think this is funny? Why would people think that this is in good taste? Especially when it comes to the fact that on the island itself, on Jeffrey Epstein's notorious pedo island that was called Little St. Jeff's, it was known as, ghoulish influencers are going there to film content which has been a smash hit on YouTube. Maybe these people have seen this footage and think this is a funny, fun thing to do. Personally, I think it's absolutely disgusting, and those people should be ashamed of themselves. What on earth will children think? How do you explain that to a child when someone says, Mummy, what's that about? Dad, what's that about? Marilyn Hawes is Chief Executive of Freedom from Abuse. Marilyn, where do you start with this?
Well, as you say, where do you start with it? I mean, why? What's Epstein got to do with Ireland? But also, I mean, anything, the wonderful Ofcom and the online safety bill and all of this, that stuff like this that could be harmful to children, which it is. I'm not being funny. I feel sickened by the sickos that are out there. I mean, these people are insane. They need arresting. I mean, it is absolutely, as you say, beyond disgusting. It's abysmal. It's vile. It's outrageous. as you say, I think I saw a little 3-year-old there.
Yeah, there were kids there. We blurred some of the faces of the kids because it's not fair to them to put them on national television if they're, if they're just there at the side of it having sweets and stuff. And we're abiding by the law on that. But they're being given a man's going along, just giving them sweets. This is meant to be a really good day out, and this is what they're shown, Marilyn.
But what's it got to do with St. Patrick's Day?
Nothing.
I mean, St. Patrick was the guy who actually introduced Christianity to Ireland.
It's not very Christian to have those kind of things.
This is absolutely anything but Christian. This is the work of the devil. I mean, I just don't get it. I don't understand why somebody didn't step in and go, oh, what the hell's going on, and clear the streets and get rid of them. I mean, I just can't believe what I've just watched. I really can't believe what I've just watched.
It really is shocking. It really is shocking. And actually, I'm actually going to look up what Alan Shatter, who I just think is a brilliant guy, he's the former Justice Minister of Ireland, wrote about it. He said it was sick and really people had to... let me just find the tweet that he actually wrote about this, because he was absolutely appalled by it, and certainly, like so many people, was just absolutely shocked by what happened. And he says it's now normalised, this kind of activity. I mean, if you're a victim, you have a lot of experience with victims of sexual abuse. If you were to see that, if that was to happen in your community, what would your reaction be, Marilyn?
Well, I would honestly, I just felt sick watching it, because I hadn't seen those videos. I'd seen the report that your researchers sent me about, Epstein and these sickos that are like flying out and getting scuba diving kits to go on Epstein Island, but I hadn't seen this. This is the first time I've seen it.
Yeah, Alan Shatter, the former Justice Minister of Ireland, said, so sick. What group, retail outlet or individual sponsored or acted out on and around the float? Was, who authorises participation? What was the intended message? Is next year's follow-up a float depicting the thousands of children sexually abused over decades in Ireland? Do people think that's funny?
Well, exactly. I don't understand why they did it. Why Ireland? I don't get it. I mean, I don't get it anyway. But I mean, if Epstein was something to do with Ireland,
no, he wasn't. No, this is what they do. They do things. It's meant to be a family entertainment day. They do things which people think are funny and will amuse people. And these parades happen in many towns in Ireland. They're meant to bring a bit of a laugh to people. Sometimes they satirise things that are in the news, and that's fine to do. Sometimes you see sort of funny politicians or whatever. But in this particular instance, I mean, I've covered as a reporter, I've covered family days out. I remember seeing, the Flintstones on the back of a lorry and people thinking this was hilarious. That's fine. They were saying,
different.
Yes, of course.
That is different. This is obscene. It's just disgusting. I mean, I just got no words for it, quite honestly. The people need arresting. Somebody. It isn't funny at all. I've got no words for it, Peter. I'm stunned by what I'm watching. And I think the Justice Minister over in Ireland should gather up all these people, and the people that actually sponsored this and considered that this would be good entertainment need arresting.
Well, I think I would at least ask them the question, why on earth did you think this was funny? Just on the point about these influencers going to Jeffrey Epstein's island, filming content, putting it on YouTube, there is an appetite for it. It's a ghoulish appetite, Marilyn.
Well, there is no. Do you know what? The older I get, the more angry I get about the lack of moral compass in so many people these days that don't even stop and consider the victims. Do you know there have been 52 million views of these videos where people have gone out there and thought this was going to be highlighting their YouTube content, and there was one guy. I mean, these people are vacuous, they're vapid, they've got nothing to contribute to society whatsoever. And influencer, oh yeah, like what? But, there was one guy called Ahmed Aburab, I think I've got his name, I don't know, whatever. He and I quote, he said, I make this video because I know it will go viral, and that fits my usual content. Well, whoopee-dee. I hope you feel good about the victims of Epstein and everybody. Haven't they been traumatized enough without you crawling all over them?
Very good point. Very good point. Certainly. Marilyn, listen, thank you for that. I think we all feel outraged by all of that. It is just sick and horrible, whatever your reaction. Maybe you think it's okay. Maybe you think this is good, clean fun, or a hilarious thing, or maybe it's just curiosity. Maybe it's just what the human condition does. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. Send me a voice note on that number too. We'll get to calls in just a minute or two. We're also going to talk to Sir William Patey, who's the former UK ambassador to Afghanistan, to Sudan, to Saudi Arabia and to Iraq. He will know what's going on in the Middle East. It'll be very interesting to talk to him and to see, to get his reaction to what both Hegseth has been saying, Trump, and indeed Netanyahu too. Stay with us here on Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thank you so much to everybody who's been in touch. Quite a few tweets coming through as well. Let me just read out a few of them. Les says, St Patrick's Day used to be about showing penance by trekking up a stony path to the top of Slemish Hill in County Antrim in Northern Ireland near the hamlet of Buckna. Great view on the top. Have you ever been up? I can't say I have, but my friend's son is is the Presbyterian minister in Buckna, believe it or not. Christine says, reacting to a tweet and sending it to me from a guy called Ray, who says, if Starmer won't answer direct questions or Prime Minister questions, MP should have the right to treat him as a hostile witness. He should be sanctioned by the Speaker. Christine says, what are your thoughts on this? We can't continue with the Prime Minister dodging questions. Who actually trusts him anymore? Well, as I said a bit earlier on in the programme, Christine, I think that the Speaker can at least say that it's not for the Prime Minister to question other people. It's actually for him to answer those questions. And he would argue, the Prime Minister would argue, that he's giving answers. But the question is, of course, is he? And so many people don't think he is. Certainly many questions for the Prime Minister on the Middle East, and in the last little while the UK and 5 other nations, France, Germany, Italy, the Netherlands and Japan, have said that they are ready to contribute to ensuring safe passage through the Strait of Hormuz. We express our readiness, they say, to contribute to appropriate efforts to ensure safe passage. We condemn in the strongest possible terms recent attacks by Iran on unarmed commercial vessels in the Gulf, attacks on civilian infrastructure, including oil and gas installations, and the de facto closure of the Strait of Hormuz by Iranian forces. We express our deep concern about the escalating conflict. We call on Iran to cease immediately its threats, laying of mines, drone and missile attacks, and other attempts to block the Strait to commercial shipping, and to comply with a relevant UN Security Council resolution. I want to speak to Sir William Patey. Now, he's a former UK ambassador to Afghanistan. He also served as ambassador to Sudan, Saudi Arabia, and Iraq. Really interesting to talk to you this evening, Sir William. I just wonder what your thoughts are on this move by these 6 nations and what effect, if any, you believe it will have.
Well, I mean, they're responding to a rather sort of variable approach from the American president, who says one moment we don't need your help and the next moment we do. There undoubtedly is a shared interest in freedom of navigation in the Straits of Hormuz, because although not huge amounts of Middle East oil come to Europe, most of it goes to Asia, to Korea, to Japan and China. We have a significant interest in the freedom of navigation through the Straits of Hormuz and the Red Sea. So even although the European countries didn't start this war, they weren't consulted about it, they do have an interest. So it's quite right that they offer some support as part of an international effort. What they don't want to do is for America to declare victory, go off and leave the Europeans with the task of keeping the Straits of Hormuz open while there's still a hostile Iran. So there's a lot of discussion with the US still to go on.
And with Israel presumably as well. I just want to hear a little bit about Netanyahu, what he's been saying in the last couple of hours or so about close coordination with Trump, and then get your reaction. Let's just hear what the Israeli Prime Minister has been saying.
I think what is also good for future generations. In this case, those interests are absolutely clear, and so is the clarity of our achievements. Together in close coordination with President Trump, the close coordination between America and Israel, our militaries, our intelligence services, we're achieving goals in lightning speed. But I want to say another word. It's been said that for 40 years, I've been saying that Iran is a danger to Israel and a danger to the world.
Sir William, what do you make of what Benjamin Netanyahu said there?
Well, I mean, he's been very honest and open. He's wanted to attack Iran for 40 years. The Israelis certainly see Iran as an existential threat. They have wanted to weaken Iran, to see the overthrow of the Islamic leadership in Iran. So this is very much an Israeli war, in my view. I think the Americans have been sucked into it. The Israelis have very clear objectives, which I'm not...
Do you think Donald Trump has been... We'll get to the objectives just in a second. I'm keen to do that with you. But do you think Donald Trump has been sucked into this? Why is that? Why do you say that?
Well, I mean, he obviously, like the rest of the world, sees Iran as a hostile state and as a malign influence in the region. But given that they were engaged in talks in Geneva just before this war started, in pursuit of what were declared American and international objectives, which was to limit Iran's ability to acquire nuclear weapons, and they were making progress on that. To suddenly switch to a full-out assault on Iran without even considering the consequences for the Straits of Hormuz, their Gulf allies, the consequences for the global economy, those are things that Donald Trump seems surprised about, whereas Israel has very clear objectives, which is to weaken the Iranian state to the extent it can, to use this window of opportunity. They've got a United States president willing to join with them in attacking.
So do you think the Israelis? I mean, I don't want to be glib about this. I don't want to be flippant. But do you think he was hoodwinked into it, or do you think he did it against his will in some way? I don't think
he did it against his will. I mean, it's almost like how Britain got sucked into the Iraq War. You kind of share the overall objectives with the. We shared the overall objectives with the Americans, even though we had doubts about it. So the Americans were in a position where, when talking to Netanyahu, they would have agreed with the Israelis that Iran was a long-term threat, a strategic threat. The question is about imminence, about whether they're an imminent threat, which they clearly were not an imminent threat, given the previous attacks and the declarations of obliterating Iran's nuclear weaponry. So I think Israel has taken advantage of a window of opportunity here, using their their excellent intelligence to take out the Iranian leadership. Yeah. And I think the timing of all this has been driven by the Israelis rather than the Americans. I don't think they've been hoodwinked, but I think they've been perhaps encouraged beyond wiser counsels.
Yeah. Interesting. Israel, Netanyahu says, has the three objectives. You've alluded to them there, of course, Sir William. To completely annihilate Iran's nuclear program, to completely annihilate Iran's ballistic missile program, and to create conditions that allow Iranians to take their fate into their own hands. My personal view is that I am for this war if those three things happen, especially when it comes to regime change. I just wonder whether Trump saying today he's not going to put ground troops in Iran, whether any of those things is actually possible with an air war in your estimation.
Well, my experience in Iraq and Afghanistan is that overwhelming air superiority can achieve lots, but it has limitations. And the one thing it never does is change things on the ground very much, or change regimes. And I think it's almost impossible to envisage a change of regime just by the exercise of air power. And I don't think for 1 minute the Americans are going to put troops on the ground to achieve that object, or even the Israelis. So they're basically attacking and hoping. And for the Israeli point of view, if they achieve the first two, they'll be very happy. To weaken Iran's nuclear capability, to set it back another 10 years, to reduce their ballistic capability, that will almost be enough for the Israelis, because at the same time they've taken the opportunity to invade Lebanon and finish off Hezbollah. That'll be quite good for them. A change of regime would be a bonus for the Israelis. But
do you think Trump cares about regime change? Do you think he cares about it?
I don't think so. Okay. A compliant Iran, a weakened Iran would support them. But the problem now is the cost that is causing, to our Gulf allies. Gulf allies may be thinking twice about the value of a US alliance if it costs them the sort of economic cost and the attacks they're suffering from the Iranians, which is, of course, a very deliberate Iranian strategy to broaden the war, to make it a world war, so that it brings it to a halt much quicker.
Well, yeah, and how does this come to a resolution? Because the resolution that the Israelis want and the resolution that the Americans want may be very different from all the other players, including someone who may not even really be a player, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, Keir Starmer.
Well, I mean, we're a player in the sense that, like many other European countries, we want an end to this war. We want an end to this conflict. There are Britons under threat who've made their home in the Gulf. There are tourists who've made their home in the Gulf. We have investments. We have strong relationship with all these Gulf countries, and the freedom of navigation in the Straits of Hormuz is very important to us as well as other countries. I think the way it will be resolved is, for the Iranians, victory is survival. And there, I look back to the Iran-Iraq war in the 80s, when they faced overwhelming odds when the Iraqis attacked them, and they fought a war for 8 years and survived. And survival was their war aim. I fear they may survive and come back to fight another day. And at the end of the day, they'll run out of targets. Eventually, the Israelis and the US will run out of targets, and the economic costs will become that much higher. I think at some stage we'll see a very messy end. I don't think we'll see a resolution to this anytime soon.
Can I ask you one more question before you go? And it's in regard to your time as ambassador to Afghanistan. In my view, and you are quite literally the expert, but in my view, the airlift and how we got out of Afghanistan, particularly the Americans getting out of Afghanistan, could have been done so much better. And actually, Biden, I think there are many, many questions. When you look back, not just on your time in Afghanistan, but on the whole British adventure in Afghanistan, adventure is the wrong word, but you know what I mean, was it worth it?
Well, I don't think we had any choice. I mean, I think Iraq was a war of choice. I don't think Afghanistan was. I mean, it's important to remember, the Americans, that the only time we've ever invoked Article 5, the only time NATO has ever come to another NATO ally is then. And it just shows you how difficult, when you overthrow a regime and try to build a country up, how difficult it is and how long it takes. I think the way we left was shameful and a scandal. Actually, Donald Trump bears some of the responsibility, because he was the one who signed the Doha Agreement, which basically agreed with the Taliban that the Americans would leave without any political concessions from them. I still think even in these circumstances it could have been handled differently.
Who's more to blame, do you think, Biden or Trump?
I think they share. I think they share some equal blame there in the way that resolved itself.
Sir William, fascinating to talk to you. Thank you for joining me on Talk. I hope you join me again sometime soon, because it's just been really, really interesting. I've learned an awful lot from what you've told me. And unlike, I mean, we have some brilliant former ambassadors. Edmund Fitton-Brown is fantastic, for example. But sometimes with people who've been ambassadors, you do get a little bit of the pompousness. You sometimes do get a little bit of the, I know so much better than you. And actually, Sir William Patey, Edmund Fitton-Brown, a few others that we speak to are just absolutely superb at just breaking it down, telling us actually what's happening, and speaking in English as well, and just telling us what's happening. Thank you so much to him. Lots to discuss. Quite a few people getting in touch on the Epstein story and these displays on St Patrick's Day in Ireland. Kingsley in Belfast says, good evening, Peter. Good evening, Kingsley. Just to echo what Marilyn said, this Epstein display on St Patrick's Day is a complete show of tone-deaf insensitivity, appalling and disgusting. What exactly is the connection between Jeffrey Epstein and St Patrick's Day? Leslie in Hartley says, I cannot believe what I've just watched. How can anyone feel this is appropriate on a family day and disregard the poor victims of this vile man, the poor victims of this vile man? I feel so upset by this, says Leslie. David says, perhaps the onlookers should clear the streets and make them seem even more stupid and ashamed, but onlookers give it audience. Losers longing for fresh creative ideas of self-expression in this wannabe world, says David in East London. Betty says, every small town in Ireland has a Hamas and Gaza propaganda unit embedded and paid for the taxpayer. I don't think that's quite right, to be honest, Betty. All of those clowns are linking Epstein, anti-Semitism and pro-Gaza. It's nuts. Every 10th house on the border has a Palestinian flag now. I'm not quite sure that's true, Betty, but certainly there are an awful lot of people in Ireland, the Republic of Ireland, and in Northern Ireland as well, who are pro-Palestinian, and that's fine. That's a perfectly legitimate opinion to have, but there is an awful lot of anti-Semitism and just straightforwardly anti-Semitic views, as well as anti-Israeli opinions. Regarding the St Patrick's Day debacle, says Catherine in Cardiff, I believe we are witnessing the end of civilization. Society is in the sewer now. I really fear for the future of my grandchildren. And Aaron in Belfast says, regarding the St Patrick's Day parades, these parades have been hijacked to be political now, with what have Palestinian flags got to do with St Patrick? Interestingly, the mayor of New York, Mondami, did a message and linked, resistance to oppression from the Irish to the Palestinians. I mean, just absurd. I was sent it by a friend. What has that got to do with St Patrick? Epstein have nothing to do with St Patrick, says Aaron in Belfast. Also, 90% of young people wearing Celtic or Gaelic GAA tops. Also nothing to do with St Patrick. And who wasn't Irish, actually. He was Welsh, we think. So much to talk about. Lots of people getting in touch about Trafalgar Square as well. I'll read those out in a minute. Take some calls as well, including one on the Archbishop of Canterbury and what she's up to. Stay with us here on Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, you have responded, and thank you to everybody who sent in voice notes. Let's have the first one of the evening from Elisa in Chelmsford.
I just want to say that I completely agree with Nick Timothy. And regarding PMQs, as the Speaker doesn't have the power to compel the PM to answer questions, he certainly needs to be given the power to do so. We are paying the wages of these politicians. It's the least we deserve to hear answers to questions put by the opposition.
Certainly agree with you on PMQs, Lisa, and thank you for that. And yes, do send in your voice notes. On my weekend show, we just got more. I don't really know why, but if you send in voice notes, we can play them if they're legal and we can play them out. We will do that because I want to give you a voice, certainly. And we have plenty of phone calls coming in as well, including Joe in Cheltenham, who wants to speak about Dame Sarah Mullally, who is the Archbishop of Canterbury. Joe, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Hi, Peter. Yes, I'm not aware of a pilgrimage back to Canterbury to avoid the assisted dying bill, but the Archbishop of Canterbury was in the House of Lords yesterday voting for an extension to the abortion ruling. So now we basically have infanticide in the UK.
So she says, let me just read what her office says. The Archbishop of Canterbury, Dame Sarah Mullally, opposed the decriminalisation of women terminating their own pregnancies because it risks making an imperfect situation worse. Do you disagree with her on that, Joe?
I do understand that there are always going to be cases where children, babies and mothers are at risk, and it has always been the situation that you can terminate a pregnancy if the mother or the child is at life risk of
threat to life, risk to life. Yeah,
threat to life, exactly. But we are now allowing in this country abortions to take place right up to a child being born. Once the child is born,
that's not quite the law, is it? At the moment, it's 24 weeks. It's not right up to
the
birth.
law is 24 weeks, but the House of Lords have just voted it in. It was under the policing bill.
Okay.
It was clause 208. And it was wrapped up in a policing bill that talked about lots of other clauses. And the argument is that this is for the mother's health care. So we are putting mothers' opinions about whether or not they want to continue to have a child. We are letting them have that vote right up until the point that the child is ready to be born.
Right.
And many children survive, as we all know. There have been lots of situations.
Certainly.
We have a fantastic medical profession that enables children.
Oh, I have a friend whose child was born at 34 weeks. She's a thriving 21-year-old. Just when we're talking when we talk about Dame Sarah Mullally, she is going on this pilgrimage. She's walking between London and Canterbury. No archbishop for I think centuries has done that previously. Is that what she should be doing, or should she be in the House of Lords talking about, for example, assisted dying, which is being debated at the moment?
I think that's where she should be right now.
Okay.
I think the country needs our Archbishop of Canterbury to show strength and determination when our country is literally being lambasted on a daily basis with clauses and laws that are being put in place that were never in our government's manifesto. The majority of continental Europe have an abortion rule at up to 12 weeks, with the exception of the Netherlands, and I think maybe France is a little bit longer. I notice none of our current government are signposting the EU like they usually do in this case, because it doesn't support this particular ruling. I think this is desperately sad, and we are now in the same boat as communist China in terms of how we treat the unborn child.
Joe, thank you for your call. Really considered, really intelligent, and quoting chapter and verse there and all of that. Thank you, Joe. Give me a ring anytime. John in Belfast has given me a ring too, 03444991000. John, what are your thoughts this evening?
Well, my thoughts is now, what happened to this country they called Great Britain or United Kingdom? Because it's definitely not great. and it's definitely not united.
Those are very good points, Sean.
And Keir Starmer, I think instead of putting a little hanky in his top pocket, he should put a white feather. Because if I was Iran leadership, I'd be saying, please don't get rid of him. Keep him where he is.
Do you think he's a coward?
Yes, I do think he's a coward.
Okay.
I do think he's a coward, and I think there's a lot of people cowards now. You know, at the end of the day, there's, you know, as you say about chicken or really silly things.
Yeah.
Now it's unbelievable. There's people in jail for silly things, but you've got your man, the IDF, the guy somewhere. He's got a funny name, you know. He's started singing again, and they'll probably find a reason to say, no, he didn't, you know, about the IDF. I think.
Oh, yes, Pascal Robinson Foster. Yeah, no, it's a fair point.
He's got and you know, the only thing they've done for Kneecap and him is probably give him a high priority, where somebody that can't understand music go to their concerts.
Yeah,
okay?
it's a lot of publicity. John, thank you. That's John in Belfast there, and yeah, he was talking about Pascal Robinson Foster there, who is the one of the singers, I use the term loosely, in the band, I use the term loosely, Bob Villan, and he was at his old tricks again on Sunday at that Al-Quds protest. So you're asked to come along, and then of course he starts shouting death, death to the IDF again. And the Metropolitan Police do absolutely nothing. Stratford, Avon and Somerset Police did an investigation. Crown Prosecution Service said there was not enough evidence to support it. Off he went to do what he wanted. Then he went to Amsterdam and said Charlie Kirk's death was a good thing. Then Pascal Robinson Foster, now back in London at the Al-Quds march, or the Al-Quds protest. So you're going to a protest that supports the Iranian regime, and you're calling for death to the IDF as well. I mean, some people just need to find a better way to spend their Sunday, quite frankly, and one of them is called Pascal Robinson Foster, the anti-Semitic scumbag that he is. Talking about, let's see, Debbie says, my granddad had no faith and was vocal about it when he died. My mother found his crucifix from World War II, and Jesus was nearly entirely rubbed off. We may not be practicing Christians per se, but we pray in times of need. Prayer is sacred and should be intimate between you and your God, not a display. Just makes the prayer worthless. Interesting thoughts there, plenty more to come here on Talk. Stay with us.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, you're very welcome to talk. It's just gone 9 o'clock. I'm Peter Cardwell. Loads to discuss in the next hour, including with you. Let me know your thoughts. 0344 499 1000 on whatever is on the tip of your tongue. We'll go to America in a second to find out what Trump has been saying, also what the latest is on the war in Iran, and what Israel wants to happen too, and what the UK wants to happen, because there's been a coalition, France, Germany, Italy, the Netherlands and Japan, that says that they are ready to contribute to ensuring safe passage through the Strait of Hormuz. We'll talk about that. Sadly, for family reasons, the man who I wanted to talk to about the car parking story has very sadly had to deal with an issue there. We hope to get him on tomorrow night, but sadly he can't come on the programme tonight. But we have talked about that story, great story, about the man who decided that he was going to, as a little hobby, go into every car parking space in his local Sainsbury's. We'll talk too about the jails watchdog being deeply concerned over the risk to the public as dangerous criminals have been released from high security prisons, and the allegation that male judges will be biased and discriminate against women under the plans that the Justice Secretary has to scrap jury trials for sentences of 3 years and under. Lots to discuss, including about those St Patrick's Day marches in Ireland, and deeply, deeply tasteless things about Jeffrey Epstein as well, the different floats, and we were meant to entertain people. They're hugely, hugely offensive. Whatever you think, 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text me 87222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV. Follow me at Peter Cardwell. A special shout out and plea for voice notes as well on all my shows. At the weekend we had a lot. We seem to have fewer. I don't know why. In the evenings, you're very, very welcome to send your voice note in less than a minute, and we will play them out between now and 10. 0344 499 1000. You can text me, as I say. You can send me a WhatsApp text message on that main number, or give me a ring on the main number too. So much to discuss between now and 10. Stay with us here on Talk. And don't forget, I'm here 5 nights a week these days, including tomorrow night between 7 and 9. Slightly shorter programme on a Friday, early bath for me, and you get What Just Happened with Kevin O'Sullivan. He's on Drive too, so I'm going to sort of Kevin O'Sullivan sandwich on Fridays between his Drive show and What Just Happened, on for 2 hours between 7 and 9. So hopefully we will get Car Parking Man on tomorrow night if everything's okay with his family issues. So we'll see. Hopefully he can come on then. Thanks to everybody who's been in touch. And Betty says, I was over at Christmas in Ireland. Even Carrick-on-Shannon has a cultural centre, same as Scotland's Highlands, using NHS staff as a reason for planning consents. And another person in touch about Trafalgar Square and the fact that there were many hundreds of Muslims praying there. One person says, you can see this whole Trafalgar Square thing becoming like a monthly event, and before we know it, we'll have our own little black box there like Mecca. We've opened such problem now for this country is completely beyond repair. It cannot be fixed. This division is terminal. Another person says, I'm sorry, but we have to stop tiptoeing around the Islamification of Britain. The fact that 39% of British Muslims support a brutal and medieval Iranian regime, those statistics are out this week from Policy Exchange, is proof, this person says, that the culture does not accept our values and cultures. Very few will ever speak out about the rape gangs abhorrent to Western life. We have to stop this now, and I'm sorry, we have to ban such intimidatory behaviour as demonstrated in the Trafalgar Square March on Sunday. So, lots to discuss about America as well, not least what Benjamin Netanyahu has been saying about coordination with Trump. Let's see what the Israeli Prime Minister has been saying.
I think what is also good for future generations. In this case, those interests are absolutely clear, and so is the clarity of our achievements. Together in close coordination with President Trump, the close coordination between America and Israel, our militaries, our intelligence services, we're achieving goals in lightning speed. But I want to say another word. It's been said that for 40 years, I've been saying that Iran is a danger to Israel and a danger to the world.
Benjamin Netanyahu, the Israeli Prime Minister. Also, we've heard that the UK and 5 other nations, France, Germany, Italy, the Netherlands and Japan, have expressed that what they say is their readiness to contribute to appropriate efforts to ensure safe passage through the Strait. Let's speak to Michael Yaki, the US political analyst and former senior advisor to Congresswoman Nancy Pelosi. Michael, how are you? How are you doing?
I'm doing great, Peter. Just wondering if maybe Car Park Man could be used to kind of move ships through the Straits of Hormuz. You seem to have a real knack for.
That's not a bad idea, actually.
Space.
Maybe he could evaluate the different. He looked at there was something like 280 car parking spaces in his local supermarket. He tried every single one of them. So I mean, I never thought I'd be talking to Michael Yaki about car parking spaces, but there we are, Michael. I mean, that's the beauty of talk. Onto arguably slightly more serious issues. What do you make of what Netanyahu said there, and how Israel and America are acting in concert, or perhaps not, when it comes to Iran?
Well, I mean, I think that he was trying to say they were acting in concert because earlier the president said they weren't. And I think that this is something where he's very sensitive to the issue of what kind of support he has in America, and ensuring that he is in lockstep with the president is going to be very important for him, his support at home, but also for support for the war from the administration. So, we'll just have to see how this plays out.
Yeah, it's interesting, certainly from Trump's perspective. Where do you think he is on this? Because the Israelis say their three goals are to completely annihilate Iran's nuclear program. I think it's probably the case that Trump's on board with that, but I'll be interested to hear your opinion. To completely annihilate Iran's ballistic missile program. But the third one, I think, is where they probably differ. I'd be interested to hear your view, Michael. To create conditions that allow Iranians to take their fate in their own hands. Regime change doesn't seem to me to be something that Trump will die on a hill over.
Well, what's interesting is that was sort of the initial talking point, right?
Yeah.
That they were talking that the president, and it said over a week ago, this is what we're doing. We're doing this in order to create regime change in Iran, and as a message in terms of, say, human rights, in terms of women's rights, other things. That's an important message, but that's certainly not what we've been seeing happen. And he certainly kind of dropped that in the last 10 days, at the very minimum, in terms of what exactly is the real goal. And in fact, we're ready to sure what the real goal is. What we do know is that his director of national intelligence said at a congressional hearing just the other day that she did not think that she said that we had obliterated the Iran nuclear program, and that they had taken no steps to restart it. They didn't think that they had any capability of ballistic missiles for at least until 2035. So, there's a lot of, interesting contradictions within the administration in terms of what exactly are the real goals here. And, and all this runs downhill, as they say, and it runs downhill, especially to countries like the countries in Europe and Japan, countries that rely more heavily on Middle East oil than the United States, and where apparently that consideration never seemed to make it into the calculus of what was going to be the fallout from this kind of attack and the nature of the attacks that are going on in Iran today.
Yeah, and that fallout, of course, has really affected the Straits of Hormuz. Do you think that Trump perhaps it was a surprise? We had a guest earlier on who said that Trump was slightly drawn into this perhaps by Israel. It wasn't particularly an anti-Israeli point necessarily, but just saying that perhaps he didn't quite realise what he was getting into. And now you have these 6 nations, including the UK, that say they stand ready to contribute to the appropriate efforts to ensure safe passage through the Strait of Hormuz.
Well, a week ago we were talking about this, and I said I didn't think that we thought this out. And then, like 48 hours later, we heard reports from the Pentagon saying, we really didn't think this out. We suggested it. We said this could be an issue, but it was never part of the gaming strategy that all of us go through when you were in politics, when I'm in politics. Whenever we think about an action we're going to take, we go through what possible consequences could fall out.
And you go into worst case scenario. What
absolutely,
worst
case scenarios.
Yeah, who's going to react? Who's going to put out a statement? Who's going to put out a tweet? What happens if this person who's an opponent puts this out? How do we react to that? You think all that through that scenario planning. Do you not think that was done? And can that actually be done? Because Trump's version, I'm not saying it's good or bad, but Trump's version of politics is very, very different from the more traditional type of politics that we both worked in, Michael.
No, I mean, it very much is, as he has said, sort of his own sense, his own gut, his own thinking of what's going to work and what's not going to work. But the problem is that the world doesn't operate that way, and certainly the way individual countries operate doesn't go that way. And if you had done any studying of this at all, and there's been plenty of it gamed out over 3-4 administrations, the possibility that Iran would go, for lack of a better word, ballistic and go after the other countries to turn this into a regional war, to make oil much more of a hostage in this entire thing, including doing a blockade or harassing the Straits of Hormuz. In 1987, there was a blockade by Iran at the time. It took 30 warships in a convoy to escort tankers through, and that's before drones, smart technology, all of those things that make it much more harder to defend against, much less the thousands of speedboats that they have with rockets that are running around that area right now. So these are things that needed to be gamed out, aren't gamed out, and now we're in a situation where you have the statement by the 5 countries stating that we're ready to help out. But if you notice in that statement, they never say anything about helping the United States, helping Israel, or even taking any, decrying what's going on with Iran. But there's going to have to be some kind of solution brokered, I believe, by Europe, by the European nations, by the Prime Minister, because I don't think that it's going to happen with Trump and Netanyahu.
It's interesting. I wonder if the Iranians are in any position or mood to negotiate. I also wondered if you could just tell me the American reaction to the bombing of the Qatari oil field, because there have been mixed messages coming out of the White House about this too.
Well, it's interesting. We're apparently going to, in the realm of head scratching, we're apparently going to lift the sanctions on Iranian oil in order to help ensure that the price of oil doesn't go up in the United States.
That's quite weird.
Exactly.
I can see the logic. I can see the logic, but it's a strange logic, is it not?
It's a very strange logic, especially since this is going to essentially benefit the country that you're actually at war with, by allowing their oil to get through and to be sold at a lower price. So you're saying, well, they won't make as much money. Well, they're going to make a lot more because they're going to get more oil through to do it. I mean, but I really wanted to talk about this one thing with you, Peter, just for a second.
Sure.
And that is there is really, as you know, no bystanders in a war. They're either for or against one way or the other. Neutrality is just a way station to taking sides. And I think it's going to be really incumbent upon the European countries, including the United Kingdom, including the Prime Minister, to decide what steps they are going to take in order to try and broker some kind of a deal.
Do you actually think, Michael, that Keir Starmer, who has been, I mean, I'm not sure he's actually done particularly well on this, but a lot of people, public opinion is behind him on this. They're against the war in Iran. They may not think that he's a great leader, but they think certainly his actions are in concert with what public opinion is. Those two things are different, but they're related too. I just wondered, do you think Starmer could actually be someone who could be a peacemaker in all of this?
Well, every leader has their moment of test, right? Their testing moment. This is in many ways Starmer's testing moment. And the question is he going to live up to that moment or not? Because this could have enormous consequences to the we all remember what the in 2022 when there was the oil crisis and what that did to the budget of the national budget and the consequences, knock-on effects that probably led to one of the reasons they helped Labor to its victory 2 years ago. And I think that this is that testing moment for Starmer. And the question is, can he live up to that? Because it is clear right now, at least I think it's clear to a lot of observers, including in the United States, that no one is really sure what the president wants to do, will do, or has an exit strategy to get out of this, other than to say, I'm stopping, I'm getting out, and I'm going to leave it all to you.
And what about Trump's support himself? Because we have, I think, a pretty fractured Republican Party, some on the more traditional side. I mean, there's so many people who've talked for years and years and years about bombing Iran. John McCain got into trouble for joking about it, singing about it to the Beach Boys music. And also, you know, Donald Rumsfeld back in the day, George W. Bush, they would have loved to have done this. They've talked about this for years and years and years and years. The MAGA movement, not so keen, but Trump is going in a different direction to that. I wonder how it affects him. I wonder how it affects the midterms, perhaps, as well.
I think there's sort of two ways to look at it. One is the American people, I think, are pretty much not happy with this war. On the other hand, we're committed to it, and they want to see it through. Now they're not quite sure what that seeing it through is going to be, and I think part of it is the confusion in the messaging from the White House right now. But certainly for a portion of the MAGA base, the idea that no more foreign incursions, no more regime change, no more drawn out wars without a game plan. I mean, they are mad as bees right now at what's going on. But I think the majority of the Republicans, and I think that a good portion of the American people want this to work out for the best, whatever that means.
Yeah. Michael, thank you. Always worth listening to you. Michael Yaki, their US political analyst, former senior advisor to Congresswoman Nancy Pelosi. Always good to have a yak with Yaki. Speaking of having a yak, voice notes, and a lovely message actually from Jason in the Lake District, who's one of our regular correspondents. He says, having listened to other talk shows at night and in the past, on and off, I can't remember really hearing voice notes in the past. And the frequency of your weekend shows, Peter, is always the more regular in the earlier shows. It's nothing you're doing wrong personally. It's a different audience. Why don't you love me? No, I'm going to show you right now how to do a voice note. So you go into WhatsApp and you literally open, you've got to put our number in, which is of course 0344 499 1000. So I have WhatsApp open here. And literally all you do is you look at the little microphone on the right-hand side of WhatsApp, on the right-hand side of the sort of the middle, and pull it up and just go, hello talk, this is Peter testing voice notes. Then you send it through. That was 4 seconds. Anything up to a minute is absolutely fine. You send it through to 0344 499 1000. The same way you send a voice note to anybody else, and then we play it out. In fact, what the team behind the glass are going to do during the break is turn that around and get it on the air and show you how simple the process is. So if you want to send me a voice note, we can play it now, can we? Okay, play it now. Hello talk, this is Peter testing voice notes. So the key point is to have your mouth slightly further away from the microphone so we can hear you clearly. So it's dead easy. That's what happens. That's what we do. And you can send a voice note in. Calls always welcome as well on exactly the same number, 0344 499 1000. We'll take some of those next, including, as promised, on Tuesday night. I promised them last night, but then I wasn't on last night because we had a bit of a switcheroo of various presenters because someone had a family emergency, so we all had to move around slightly. But Lenny and Ashford, as promised, I promised him I would listen to him properly because we only had a few minutes previously on Tuesday night. I'm going to do that after the break if he picks up the phone. Lenny, your moment has about to arrive. Stay with us.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Les says, has Michael Yaki recovered from the trauma of previously working for Nancy Pelosi? LOL. Well, he enjoyed working for Nancy Pelosi. She wouldn't be my cup of tea necessarily, but Michael Yaki did a great job for her. He told me, I actually had lunch with Michael Yaki. He's a fascinating guy. He's worked all over the world. He's worked for all sorts of politicians. Really, really interesting guy. And he said he didn't take a day off for 6 years when he worked for Nancy Pelosi. Obviously, American politics is just, I mean, I certainly when I worked in politics, it was busy, but not nearly as busy as that. Stu says, I hear you talk a lot about public opinion. The problem I expect is the question, says Stu. Do you support the war in the Middle East? Do you support our allies in keeping trade routes, including the Strait of Hormuz, open for the free movement of trade that will affect the UK economy? Yeah, it's often with those pollsters how you ask the question, certainly. And a lot of people get frustrated with pollsters and say, oh, they didn't ask me, or, you know, they're asking the wrong people. But it's a representative sample. I mean, you don't have to drink a whole bowl of soup to know what the soup tastes like. Also, when it comes to those questions, they do have different guidelines. If you say, you know, if there was an election tomorrow, who would you vote for? For example, I can't say, you know, would you vote Labour tomorrow, etc., without going through all the different options. Another person, Ali, says, sorry, Peter, I've heard too many politicians such as Graham Stringer trot out platitudes about stopping illegal immigration while doing nothing. Talk is cheap. Don't talk endlessly about stopping immigration. Do it. If you don't, we will, says Ali. And just to be absolutely clear, there's no endorsement of anything illegal, obviously, not that Ali was suggesting that. And he says the energy panic is a complete con. No way will they let the power go off because the phones and computers down, they'll lose digital control of the people. Optimus says, I think the Islamic mass prayer absolutely is domination. Why do they always pick British historic places? Why do they pick places where the largest amount of people can see them? Why not pray at the mosques? Taxpayers have built them. Well, I'm not sure taxpayers have built too many mosques, to be brutally honest, but anyway. Angela says, we have always had Easter parades and it was nothing like men praying in public, which was actually a show of force. Lucy Beresford was totally misguided in her comments earlier on. Many Muslim countries ban public praying. They may well do, but we're not a Muslim country. We're not an Islamic country. And that, I think, is a good thing because Islamism is dreadful. And also in many, not all, but in many Islamic countries, there is very, very little religious freedom. And the religious freedom we have in this country is something I think is a good idea. I'm not saying diversity is our strength or anything like that. I'm simply saying that the fact that you can say what you want, including if you're Nick Timothy, including if you say things like this was Muslim domination, he has the right to say that if he wants to, even if we think he's wrong, even if we think he's right. Leslie says, hi Peter, do you think Labour really want to lose the next general election? I don't think they do, and I'm not entirely convinced they will either, Leslie. I think it's, you know, a lot can change in a very, very short space of time. Reform UK, most recent poll I saw, 25% in the polls, Green Party 19%, I think Labour and the Tories were in 17%. A lot can change in a short period of time. Final one before we go to our next guest. Another person says it's not illogical to lift sanctions on the oil of Iran. They're trying to save the country, not annihilate it. If they wanted to do that, this would have ended 3 weeks ago. I promise you I will speak to Lenny and Ashford, but our next guest logged in early. That is David Shipley, a prison reform advocate and former prisoner at His Majesty's Prison, Wandsworth. David, good evening to you. Great to have you on the programme again. What do you think of these two stories? One, first of all, about the jails watchdog, deeply concerned over the risk to the public. Dangerous criminals keep being released from high security prisons. What's going on here?
So I think this is a really big growing crisis, actually. So often when we talk about what's going on in prisons, the Ministry of Justice, as you know, blames overcrowding. But one part of the prison system isn't overcrowded. It's the high security and long-term estate. And these are the prisons that hold the most dangerous men, you know, often in for murder, for manslaughter, for very serious offences.
So somewhere like HMP Franklin, where Ian Huntley was, for example.
Precisely, yes. And these prisons aren't overcrowded. But increasingly, we are seeing escalating levels of violence, escalating levels of drug taking, escalating levels of disorder. And Ian Huntley is an interesting example. As well. I think it's fair to say for almost no one, perhaps no one, was sad that he'd been killed.
His own daughter wasn't sad that he was killed.
Indeed. But the fact that these attacks are happening, and remember that's Franklin, where we had an attack on guards.
Yes, that's right.
Less than a year ago. The fact these attacks are happening shows that the prison is less and less in control of the prisoners, and that's really dangerous.
Yeah, and why are they releasing them from these? I mean, clearly their sentences are ending, and presumably you've just got to let them out. I mean, what is there any way to actually ameliorate this problem?
Well, this isn't generally speaking, what should happen with the most serious offences. So what should be happening is that if you go into prison having killed someone, during your long sentence, you should work your way through the system. So you start in a high security prison and you show that you can be trusted, you show you're making progress, and eventually you end up at an open prison where you can prove that you're going to be safe before you are released. What seems to be happening here is because the system itself is breaking down, these men are just staying in a high security environment the whole way through. So presumably, therefore, the prison system itself doesn't think they are becoming less dangerous.
Okay.
And then we're releasing them. And this is a really, really concerning situation.
And the point, I suppose, is that there should be some level of rehabilitation, or at least some version of them getting back to society, because unless you are a whole life tariff prisoner like Ian Huntley, like Rose West, like Wayne Couzens, for example, you're going to get out.
Yeah, and I think, if these men have gone to prison because they're very dangerous, if all we're doing is holding them for years or decades and then just releasing them without any pre-release planning, which seems to be, or very little, which seems to be going on here, that will mean more offending. And that will mean more.
And it works on the lower level as well. I mean, as you know, David, I worked in the Ministry of Justice, and I was a Conservative at that stage. I'm not sure I would be anymore, but I mean, I often made what I thought was a sort of conservative argument, which is, if you are in prison, you're at the lowest end, it's going to cost about 55 grand a year to keep you there. By the time you get into young offender centres and things like that, it's more like 170, 180 grand a year, and that was 5 years ago.
These guys are about 90k, the high security.
Yes. So I want those people, when they come out, to be productive members of society. I want them to have a home. I want them to have a job. I want them to pay taxes. I want them not to reoffend, and I want some of their taxes to go back to pay for the prison service that they have just left. So the point I was kind of making at those stages is, look, loads of people say, close the door, throw away the key, forget about these people. But actually, you do need to have some form of thinking, at least, of what is going to happen when these people get out. Because, as I say, unless you're whole life, I think there are 74 whole life tariffs, something like that these days. Unless you're those, the vast majority of people, fewer than 1 in 1,000 is a whole life tariff. You're going to get out, and you're going to have to do something after that.
Yeah, exactly. And this is, I often say, what we should do is look at what the British military do. So they run MCTC Colchester, which is the military corrective training centre. And there they have a very, very tough setup. It's very demanding, but it also offers a lot. So they work on the basis that each person is an individual. There's something that's gone wrong in their life, or lots of things that have gone in their life, such that they're in prison. And they work on that. So every day they have to get up and do physical training. They have to attend courses. If they've got addiction issues, they have to go and work on those. If there's often these men who are very violent were treated appallingly as children. Often they were abused as children. Then none of that makes what they did okay. But I think we should try to be empathetic and pragmatic. So we should try to understand the causes of this violence, but also stop these men doing more violence.
Yeah. Interesting. I'd love to hear more about that on a future occasion, actually. Really, really interesting. Tell us about the story about these groups thinking that male judges are going to be biased and discriminated against women under Lamy's plans to scrap jury trials for sentences under 3 years. It's really interesting that this attack is actually sort of coming from the left.
Yeah, I mean, I think this particular attack is a bit spurious, frankly, because I don't think that our judiciary are biased against women. If anything, if you look at relative sentencing, I would suggest that for most crimes, women get sentenced, less seriously than men do for approximately equivalent offences. There are some exceptions, but so I don't think that is a bias that really exists. What's much more concerning about this eliminating jury trials for many more offences, though, is that actually we know in speech offences, for example, juries are much more likely to acquit than judges are. And these changes will also mean that lots of people will find it much harder to appeal if they're found guilty in the magistrates' court. So you may recall Hamek Hoskin, the Quran burner, who's had to go through layers of appeals. Initially, he was found guilty in the magistrate court, and following these changes, he might have found it much harder to even bring an appeal. So I think there's some really concerning issues there, but also the change doesn't really make any sense. So it
doesn't make any difference. I am yet to find a member of the legal profession who says, yeah, this is going to speed things up. This is a really good idea.
I think it's actually going to make things worse. So
yes.
What they're going to have to do, because the threshold's 3 years, I'm not saying there are certain offences that will always be judge, and there were certain offences that always be jury. So before there's a trial, the CPS counsel and the defence counsel are going to have to sit down with the judge and have a sort of miniature hearing to work out what the sentence is likely to be. And if the sentence, I think, is likely to be over 3 years, and it has to be a jury trial, and if it's going to be below 3 years, it will be a judge trial. And this can create really perverse situations. So if you are someone in court on a first offence, having never committed a crime before, you are likely to get a shorter sentence, and therefore you would be less likely to get a jury. Whereas the repeat offender who's in for the 10th time he's been charged with an offence he's been found guilty of before, is more likely to get a higher sentence. So he would get a jury. And this whole hearing process will take a huge amount of time, and you'll get lawyers producing very, erudite, no doubt, arguments in favour of why it should be a jury trial or a judge trial. But actually, it'll just gobble up time, and it's not going to reduce the court's backlog.
I think that's all absolutely correct. Lots of common sense there from David Shipley, prison reform advocate and former prisoner himself at HMP Wandsworth. He also does some work for Policy Exchange, the think tank in London as well. Lenny, your phone is about to ring. Your time is coming. Lenny and Ashford, I promise to have a proper conversation with you. That will be happening after the break on Starmer, and we will get lots of other calls on the air as well between now and 10 when Ash and Andre take over. We will also talk a bit more about this horrendous, deeply offensive St Patrick's Day parade. Stay with us.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thank you to Sam in Lancashire, who says we should concentrate in particular with the young offenders. With the right support, they can reform. My son did a stint in a young offenders institution with the support of his family. He is now engaged as a step-parent, a new parent, and has become a manager in a supermarket. Sam, that's fantastic. That is someone who has turned his life around, who has been rehabilitated, and well done to you and all the people who are supporting your son, and good for him becoming a member of the, a manager in a supermarket. Like, that is absolutely superb. There are very few prisoners who go on to such a productive life, and having paid his debt to society in the Young Offenders Centre, I'm glad that he has turned his life around. Well done, Sam. That is no mean feat at all, and all the very best to you and your family in Lancashire. Lenny is in Ashford. Lenny, I wasn't here last night. I made you a promise I couldn't deliver. Apologies for that. We were moved. The shows were moved around because Jeremy Kyle's kid was sick, so I was on 1 to 4 yesterday. Sorry, I'm 24 hours later than I said I would be, but as promised, you're back in the air, and we will give you a fair hearing and a proper hearing this time, because we only had a few minutes the last time. What is in your mind, Lenny in Ashford?
Well, Labour can't get rid of Starmer no matter what, because he's holding all the aces. Now, if you take, in my long life, I have never known a politician as devious as Starmer. And with his mentality, with no conscience, he's holding all the aces, and Labour can't do nothing about it.
They've certainly changed his mind on a few things. Welfare, for example, Lenny. He's not doing every single thing he wants to do. He's done all these U-turns.
Yeah, but what he's doing, he's just going through. I mean, his reputation is worldwide. I was listening to a debate with John Kennedy, the state treasurer of Louisiana, and he was looking at some paperwork that Starmer has sent him, and he said, slide of hand is the only way I can explain this paperwork. It doesn't make sense.
Right.
He said it's totally wrong. Now, that is someone on the other side of the world talking about Starmer. Now, I truly believe that one of the aces he has got up his sleeve is Lammy, because what he's done, he's made him his deputy. Now, where Starmer was the son of a toolmaker, Lammy is the son of a taxidermist. So you just think of the damage he could do to the Labour Party and the country. That is why he is the deputy prime minister.
Well, it's not really. I mean, the reason that Lammy was demoted from foreign secretary to justice secretary, he got really annoyed and they gave him a consolation prize of deputy prime minister. I don't think Starmer really wanted to make him that, again, which would show his weakness. Well, I will in a second, Lenny, but I just want to say that your argument appears to be that Starmer's in control here. I'm not sure you're right.
Well, the other ace up his sleeve, if they try to get rid of him, he'll call an election, and then that'll be Labour finished. And he's been warning everybody for a long time when he's been saying country before party. He couldn't care less about the Labour Party. If they start and put him in a position that he's going to lose his
Lenny, that's just not borne out by the facts, because he has done what the Labour Party has asked him to do when it's come to welfare, when it's come to winter fuel allowances, for example. There are many other U-turns that he has done because he's been told to do it. You say he doesn't care about the Labour Party. Well, if he doesn't care about them, he's certainly listening to them quite a lot and doing what they tell him to do.
Well, all he's doing is prolonging his job. That's all he said, all right, I'll do what you want, and he'll prolong his job.
Well, I mean, most prime ministers want to stay in office, don't they?
Well, Starmer's priority in life is Starmer. He couldn't care nothing about the Labour Party. It's not in his mentality.
Okay.
All it is, Starmer's mentality is Starmer.
Okay.
And that's all that matters to him. And if you wait and watch, if they try to get rid of him, like you just take Richie. Richie done the same. He called a general election. Yes, because he called an election without a cabinet meeting. Because
it's up to the he doesn't need a cabinet meeting. It's up to the prime minister to decide what they do. They can do what that's one of the powers the prime minister has, to go to the king and ask him to dissolve parliament and for an election to be held. You don't need the consent of the cabinet.
Well, that's what I'm saying to you. He's got all the power in his hands. They're the aces they got up their sleeve.
All right. Lenny, I don't think we necessarily agree on quite a lot of that, but thank you for your call, and I'm glad we gave you a proper hearing this evening because it was quite rushed the other night. Simon in Sevenoaks has given me a ring about Iran, 0344 499 1000. Simon, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Pleasure to speak to you again, Peter.
You too, Simon. Go ahead.
Last time we spoke, I mentioned about ground forces.
Yes.
I said whether it's the Kurds or something else, I don't know. What's your take on President Trump dispatching a Marine expeditionary force of 2,500 men with an amphibious assault ship, the USS Tripoli, to the region, and further US ground forces being put on notice to move?
Well, he said he's not going to put ground forces into Iran, and I'd be really surprised if that happens, because that would be incredibly a big commitment and also a major problem politically. When it comes to the 2,500, I mean, there are probably 10 times that number there already. Maybe not 10 times, but certainly there'd be maybe 5 times that many there already doing what the warships are doing. So I mean, it is significant. I'm not saying it's not significant, but there are a lot of troops there already, a lot of naval vessels and Navy officers and seamen there already. So I think it's significant, yes, but it's also, it's just what happens in war. I'm not sure that ground forces are going to go into Iran. I think that is a whole different thing. And the reason I think that is, well, A, said it, B, I think it would be very, very politically unpopular, and also, given what the stated aims of Israel are, I think they're slightly different to what Trump was. I'm not sure Trump really cares about regime change. If he gets what he wants without regime change, I think he'd take it. With Israel, they really want regime change. And the regime change, honestly, I mean, nuclear stuff, really, really important, obviously, Simon, and I don't want Iran to be a nuclear nation at all, but the most important thing for me is regime change.
I agree. I suggest that this is about opening the Straits of Hormuz. There are 3 islands off the southern coast of Iran that basically hold the Straits of Hormuz to ransom. I'm thinking this amphibious force is going to be there to take command of those islands.
That'll be very interesting to see. Simon, good to talk to you again, and thank you for your call. I appreciate that. Robert's in Hertfordshire and has given me a ring at 03444991000. Robert, what would you like to say?
Peter, the most depressing thing about this, behind everything, is it seems to be instant disrespect for this country, its history, its past leaders.
Who's disrespecting who?
Well, you've got the left, which is behind it, although I think there's a darker force behind it. You've got the disrespect from the migrants coming into this country. There's no, there's no gratefulness in it. It's just this. You know, there's demonstrations on the streets. There's a disrespect for the traditions of this country. They're trying to eradicate our history. They're trying to wipe out our leaders, our past leaders, off the map. And it just seems to be a complete disrespect that I can only put down to the left or even Marxism. And I think what's happening is where there's going to be, I think there probably will be some sort of civil war.
Well, I certainly hope that's not the case, Robert. Just briefly, because we've got to move on. But how do we do? It's absolutely fine. I'm not criticising you at all, Robert. I mean, clearly your tone is quite what you're thinking and what your view on this is quite negative. I just wonder, positively, I'm not criticising you at all for that. I'm just saying positively, how can we be proud of Britain? What can we put forward that's really good about this country and say, actually, let's have pride here?
Right. Well, you ain't going to do it with this government straight away. That's the problem.
Okay.
You've got to get rid of the blob, because I don't think that Nigel Farage is going to be asked to do anything to be. That's the most depressing thing about it. I don't feel that at all. I think there's a dark force that wants us to be divided. Divide and conquer. This is what, whether it's the Fabian Society or the Marxists, I don't know who's behind all this, but someone is behind all this, and it's divide and conquer.
Robert, I think its force is much more sinister than the Fabian Society, I must say, and I do think there is a very concerted idea, a very concerted campaign to divide us, and I don't want to be divided. And in fact, there's a great organisation which involves one of my favourite guests on the show, Ike EJ, and it is called Don't Divide Us, and that is a very, very good message. Robert, thank you for your call. We're going to speak in a second to Michael Murphy, a writer for The Telegraph, about what is happening in Ireland at the moment, not just these St Patrick's Day parades, but so many other things as well. And they're just sick. They're just absolutely sick in regard to this satirisation. I think it's hilarious about Jeffrey Epstein. It absolutely isn't. Stay tuned for that. I'll also have a quick chat with Ash about what's coming up on his programme between 10 and 1. Stay with us.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Michael Murphy is with me now, the writer from The Telegraph, who writes a lot about Ireland. Michael, you're very welcome to the programme. How are you doing?
Thank you, Peter. I'm very well.
Michael, I don't know about you. I've just been absolutely appalled, shocked, but also kind of not shocked by these parades that are happening in Ireland. Like St. Patrick's Day parades, I've covered them as a journalist. I covered them in Northern Ireland. They're meant to be like a family fun day. Just tell us what they're kind of meant to be.
Well, yeah, I mean, this is, you know, the celebration of the patron saint of Ireland, and it's meant to be a day of revelry and drinking and family and friends. You know, lining the streets, filling the pubs, and
just having a nice time. It's a bank holiday in Ireland, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, let's just have a look at what has happened at two different parades, both on Tuesday. This is in, the first one is in Ballinrobe, which is in County Mayo. We're just going to have a look at this on the screen now, and I'm just going to describe it for people who are listening on the radio. If we can just play that now, the first one of these. So this is the tractor that's coming along. Children are being handed out sweets. We've blurred the children's faces. It's not their fault they're in this video. And a man is handing out those sweets there. And then there's this tractor that comes along with a trailer in the back of it, and it says Epstein Files on the front of a big sign. And then there's a guy running after what looks like a woman, and someone running after him, police officer as well. There's someone simulating rape on a bed, and someone being taken away by a police officer and put in a sort of mini jail, as though this is so hilariously funny. That's one of them. That's in Ballinrobe in County Mayo. Then another one emerged yesterday from Headford in County Galway. And this is a similar thing, back of a lorry this time, and it says Secret Island, Secret Files, and there are people sort of going around and dancing and having sexual gestures and so on. A guy with these sort of inflatable boobs. There's a guy dressed as a woman, apparently pleasuring a man in a wheelchair, and then Jeffrey Epstein, a man dressed as Jeffrey Epstein in a little sort of inflatable boat being dragged along at the bottom, and sort of scantily clad people having sex with one another. I mean, this is a family day out. This is supposedly something to do with St. Patrick, or at least a bit of fun, something that's a bit of fun. And you have children watching this, Michael. What's been the reaction in Ireland?
Well, it's, you know, the scenes that we're seeing are obviously not very PG. Some of them, admittedly, are virtually indistinguishable from some of the pride marches that we see in Western cities, albeit without the reference to the convicted paedophile Jeffrey Epstein. I find it hard to, you know, find myself, you know, clutching at pearls over this protest when I think it speaks to something deeper. I was at a protest on the Al-Quds Day march where the people were out protesting for the Ayatollah, and we saw similar Epstein iconography. So this is being, you know, there's this cliche in the media that we, you know, this is cut through to the public. And it seems like a way that they are sticking, you know, their finger in the eye of the establishment and saying, you know, you're no better than us. You all fraternized with this known paedophile. And unfortunately, it does, because the facts of the Epstein case are still so poorly understood. It does lend itself as a kind of blank check for whatever conspiracy theory you'd like to project onto it.
Project onto it. Has there been any public outcry about these? Have there been questions that have been asked? I know Alan Shatter and Rachel Moiselle, for example, two people in Ireland I hugely admire for their stances on the real problem Ireland has with anti-Semitism, have at least questioned this. I'm not saying it's anti-Semitic necessarily, but have questioned the wisdom of this, who authorised this, and why these people who took part in these parades, or who put this on, certainly we're not blaming the people, the bystanders, actually thought it was in some way appropriate.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't seen any of the government officials come out and decry this, but I'm sure that will be forthcoming in the next few days. Just from the clip you showed, I didn't see any anti-Semitic references.
No, and I'm not suggesting there are any there necessarily. I'm just saying those two campaigners have done some good work previously on that issue.
I mean, interestingly, there were anti-Semitic overtones at the Al-Quds Day march on Monday.
Where was that?
That was along the River Thames. So you had.
Oh, sorry, the one in London. I thought you meant there was one in Ireland as well. Yes, certainly there was quite a lot of anti-Semitism there. Listen, thank you for your comments this evening. That's Michael Murphy. He's a writer for The Telegraph, and those videos really are very, very shocking. So lots to discuss in all of that. And thanks for everybody for sending in your calls, texts, tweets, and indeed voice notes as well. We'll have more of those tomorrow. I'm on between 7 and 9 tomorrow, but just after the news until 1 o'clock. Ash is here with Andre. Hi, Ash.
Yeah, man, how are you doing? Has it been a good show?
I'm all right. I'm seeing an unexplained paranormal phenomenon, which is the fact that you're reading the Financial Times.
Oh, yeah.
Why
it's always ahead of the rest of the game, apart from the Sun and the Times, of course.
Obviously. Why are you reading the Financial Times?
Because it's pink.
Right,
I love it.
yes.
It reminds me of the Birmingham Sports Argos. Do you know it costs well, this is only £3.70. It's a
right.
But look how thin it is. But
at the weekend, though, it's really expensive at the weekend.
It's
too.
£5.
Yeah.
But it's such good data. It's very refined.
So do you read the FT every day?
Oh yeah, it's where you get your your business news, because I'm a bit of a businessman in the daytime. On the markets and buying and selling loads of like Gordon Gekko.
Like Gordon Gekko.
A bit like Gordon Gekko.
Do you think greed is good?
Isn't it greed? Isn't it lunch is good and greed is for wimps?
I think lunch
That's
is
where
for
I've
wimps.
been going wrong, isn't it? Oh, damn.
What about greed at lunch?
Yeah, greed at lunch. I'm
is
all
good.
for that. Yeah,
yes.
Greed at lunch is very good.
Sadly, I have indulged in that too much. What's coming up with the show?
The Greens want softer laws for terror suspects. We've been a bit too hard on the terrorists, aren't we? Hug a terrorist. So it's like hug a terrorist. Let's.
Wow.
Starmer signals U-turn after pressure from Rayner. A no-brainer, Rayner. What's going on with her? Why is she not finished? She evaded. I mean, she didn't pay the right tax.
Do you know what the best bit is? In that speech, she said, life isn't fair and there are too many people, the establishment's doing this, that and the other, and there's always someone ahead of you in the queue, someone who doesn't pay their taxes properly. I'm just like, who could you possibly be thinking of, Angela? Maybe you?
She's the one who bought a council house and then pulled the drawbridge up. She's the one that said when you resign as a minister you shouldn't get your parachute payment, which when she did it, she took it. Yeah. And she also said there should be a general election if a leader, goes.
A by-election if someone changes constituency.
Yeah, but also if the PM goes, there should be a general election. Well, she wouldn't want that, would she now? If you know what I mean? What a hypocrite.
Very good point.
And the bishop. Are we going to be bashing the bishop, or we'll find out, because he's been having a go. I think the bishop.
It is after the watershed.
Yeah, well, yeah, exactly. And bishops love being after the watershed, don't they? As a bishop, I cannot stay silent. I have today, anyways, moaning about King Prince Charles. He's not been a defender of the Christian, the Church of England. He's not a defender of the faith.
Well,
it's not in his remit. He doesn't get to choose